right, let's testify, man. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right, so I will testify of the power of God. Tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has He done it for anyone else? I said, has He done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, He's always at work. Has He done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift Him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
If I could get it to automatically switch to this, to the camera after the song was over, so I don't have to sit there and try and click on it at the right moment. So anyway, not that that's all that important. Good morning, everybody. Josiah first in the chat. I see a few people are lurking at the moment, and anybody that joins us later on, welcome. So again, and I know I've been lazy, but I've also, as you guys know, been feeling a little under the weather the last couple of weeks. But I don't really have a planned topic for today. So I just really was going to open it up to see what you guys wanted to talk about. Please, Josiah, I know you love asking about this versus that, but can we try to get a little more serious of a conversation going? I would really appreciate that. But anyway, just kind of see what's on your guys' mind, questions, comments, concerns, challenges. If you are a non believer or a different kind of believer than myself, I always welcome that. As you guys know, I actually love when somebody comes on that has a differing set of beliefs from mine, as long as, and there's a big if, as long as they can articulate and argue for their position rather than just insult and pretend that saying you're wrong is an argument. you know that kind of thing is just pointless, really. It's not even that it's tiring or anything like that. It's just kind of pointless. It's fruitless. I like having open, honest discussions because of the fact that if I'm wrong, I want to know about it, right? So I absolutely would rather be correct than or corrected, I should say, than ignorant. So I would hope that if you have a challenge to what I say or my beliefs or something like that, that you could articulate it and argue for it because I'm I like a good, honest discussion on things. Anyway, Trustin is here. It's good to see you, buddy. Stan Lee is here. I try to talk religion. I appreciate. I know. Look, I don't mind the occasional this versus that thing, but sometimes it just gets out of control, and I don't mind that it's a little sidebar every now and then. But when that's the entire conversation, it gets a little tiring. Miss Moneypenny is on her way to church. I hope you have fun. Darren says, you welcome opposition, but that opposition has to use the chat while you get to speak. Well, Darren, sorry. If you can't articulate yourselves in chat, I don't generally, why I don't really have, just like open it up and let anybody jump on is because I've had too many incidents where people have done things completely inappropriate, and I'm not going to deal with that. And I'm sorry. But if you want to, if you of all people, as incredible of a vocabulary as you possess, should be able to articulate your position in a chat. And I'm sorry. My issue, and the thing is, people say that all the time. That's actually a common argument. Oh, well, it's not fair. You get to talk while we're in chat. That's true. However, people that say that usually don't articulate a position. For example, I've had people, like what's his name, Alex Bogey, who we haven't seen in a while. He would come on, he would articulate a position, and then when I would rebut that position and wait for a response, he would just never respond, and instead he'd just re-articulate the same position over and over and over ad nauseum. And that's not an argument. That's just asserting the same thing over and over again. Now, if you want to make an argument, make an argument. You can do it in the chat. I know you can. And when somebody has a genuine argument, I will give them all the time in the world to write multiple responses if that's what they need to do. Not only that, but I'll wait for them to respond if they haven't responded to make sure that they have a chance to. But most of the time, people that want to if you want to make an argument, make an argument instead of just complaining about the format. I still think it would be cool to see you debate a pagan. I don't know. Honestly, I know it sounds like I understand what you're saying, Josiah, but pagans. It depends. A person who is a self-proclaimed pagan, usually, the problem is there's not a whole lot to discuss other than you're wrong, no, you're wrong, and that's kind of boring. Most pagans don't really believe in classical pagan beliefs. They just call themselves a pagan because they're not a Christian. and they might think that there's something spiritual. Well, it's hard to argue with someone that doesn't have a clearly defined position. Now, if someone wants to say, like, if someone is an actual practicing, worshiper of various pagan gods, I would love to have that conversation. But I've yet to meet a person who is a genuine pagan in that respect. I've just met people that are more or less agnostic, and they just believe that God is in nature in some way, and they don't really have a clear way to articulate it. Martin says, "Hello. I've been strongly debating with Muslims. They say the Bible's corrupted, hence the Quran. Really winds me up. How would you reply?" Oh, I've had that conversation a few times. There's a couple of fundamental problems with the Muslim arguments there. You're right. The Muslims believe that we that and it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways Islam is very similar to Mormonism in this respect. They believe that Christianity was true, but was then corrupted by the time Muhammad came onto the scene, and Muhammad was there to kind of straighten things out with the Quran. And okay, that's great. Now, if you say, now here's the interesting thing. So the first thing you do is you challenge them on the validity of the Quran. You say, well, wait a minute. If the Bible has been corrupted in the centuries between Christ and Muhammad, who's to say that the Quran hasn't been corrupted in the time between Muhammad and today? Now, usually the answer you will get is something to the effect that the Quran cannot be corrupted because it is preserved word of God, and because of that, it is beyond corruption. And then you can turn around and say, but wait a minute. Wasn't the original manuscripts of the Bible the preserved word of God as well? So how could that be corrupted, but yours not? What if they're both the word of God? Why is one protected and one not? Which there's no real answer for. They'll usually just try to say, well, there's no variance within the Quran, which is true. This is in the modern context. Like if you look at Qurans, they're all exactly the same. Whereas with biblical manuscripts, you have differences mostly in spelling and punctuation and word order, but you do have differences between the various ancient manuscripts. And they'll say, see, it's obviously corrupted because there's all these differences. But then you can look at what is good, solid historical evidence for something being true. And the simple fact is that if you have, every single manuscript saying the exact same thing, that does not point to accuracy. That points to conspiracy. And it's actually well documented fact that there were variants within the Quran. However, all those variants were destroyed because they wanted to put forward only a single, not translation, but a single, version, if you will, of the Quran. And so that doesn't mean that it's more accurate than the Bible. That just means it would be like, let's say that today someone got a control of all of Christianity, and they just burned every single manuscript and every single Bible that was not in 100% conformance with the NIV translation. And so everything, King James, the Holman, everything else thrown out. The NIV is it, and any ancient manuscripts in Greek and Hebrew that don't word for word translate to exactly what the NIV says, we throw away, right? And so then you go forward another couple of hundred years, and you say, look at what a miracle! All the manuscript evidence is exactly the same. Well, of course it is, because you set it up that way. And that's kind of the story of the Quran. However, but then generally speaking, the fundamental, and I'll finish on this because this is, I think, the most key argument between the biggest difference between Muslims and Christians, to be honest, is the divinity of Christ himself. And if you look at Christians and Muslims, the Muslims believe Christ was a prophet. They believe he was born of a virgin. They believe he was the Son of God, but they do not believe that he was divine. They do not believe that he was God. And they don't believe in the crucifixion, and so they cannot believe in the resurrection because they don't believe he died in the first place. And so they'll say, and I've had this, that you will not find anywhere in the New Testament that where Christ is declared or claimed to be God. Now, many people will point to various verses, like when Christ refers to himself as I am, or something like that, to try and argue with this. But if you know anything about manuscript evidence, almost any verse that you can come up with, the Muslim will very quickly point out that there are variants of that particular scripture that might suggest something slightly different, even though that's you know kind of a thin argument, but it is an argument that they can make if they want to get very pedantic about it. But there is a very good, very specific counter to that that I'm going to give you in just one moment. Because one thing that is kind of interesting is that, like, when we talk about variants in manuscripts, you think about like personal testimony. If there was a car accident and a person says, "Oh yeah, so there was a screeching of brakes, and then I heard a person scream, and then that red car smashed into the blue car," right? And then the other person says, "Oh well, I heard a woman scream." And then when I turned, I heard the screeching of brakes as that red car hit the yellow car. And then the next person says, "Well, I didn't hear any brakes, but I heard a woman scream, and when I turned around, the red car hit that brick wall." And so, as you went on and you asked all these people, you found that the one thing they all had in common was the red car was in the accident, right? So, at that point, you can pretty much guarantee that that particular fact is 100% true. While the other stuff, you would still have to do some further investigation to figure out what is true. And with the New Testament, yes, there are variants in almost every manuscript. There is one, however, and only one that I'm aware of that has zero variances. And it's kind of interesting because it is one of the most definitive pieces on the nature of Christ. And that is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made nothing was made that had been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is, of course, John chapter 1. John chapter 1, amazingly, is one of the very, very few sections of the Bible where there are no variants. They all come out pretty much exactly the same. And it is one of the most definitive moments defining Christ as the Word made flesh. That comes just a little bit later. And that the Word was with God and was God. So if you want to argue about the divinity of Christ, that is your cornerstone right there, is John 1. Darren says, "You force opposition to communicate with bumper stickers while you get soliloquies." Darren, you know what? You have your own YouTube channel. Soliloquy all you want. It's okay. We all know you wouldn't be able to handle an actual debate or even an argument or an actual discussion. Well, now you're just being insulting, Darren. If you have something you see, the funny thing is you say this when you bring nothing to the table. For example, I've made arguments against flat Earth that you refuse to address. Why? Because you know you cannot counter them, and so instead you just complain that you don't have enough room to type, the 20 words or so it would take to debunk what I would have to say. But Darren, go on. Have a nice day. The alternate history hub made a video about the English never got conquered by the Normans. The English would have made own church that were about if the English had never gotten conquered by the Normans, the English would have made their own church that would be similar to the Orthodox Church. I don't know about that. That's obviously that's hypothetical, but the Anglican Church, as it was founded, was kind of a hybrid of the Reformist movement and the Catholic Church. They were trying to have their cake and eat it too. And obviously the Anglican Church still stands today as one of the early Protestant churches. Whether they would have formed another version of the Orthodox Church or not, who knows? But I disagree with the Orthodox Church on the same principles that I disagree with the Catholic Church, which is that the Anglican Church is. A lot of people get confused when they hear like high church, low church. A high church doesn't mean that the church is somehow elevated above others or that they hold God in particularly high esteem in comparison to a low church. The high low is referring to the authority level of the church versus scripture. And so, in the case of particularly the Catholic and Orthodox churches, they genuinely believe that God created the church and the church created the Bible. Therefore, the church has authority over the Bible. The Bible has authority over man, as opposed to the general Protestant belief that God gave us the Word. The Word inspired the church, and the church is where men congregate. And so that means that the Word or the Bible is the final authority or the highest authority. The church is simply there to serve the Word, and the people are there to support the church. However, there's a big difference there because with the high church concept, the church can literally set up any rule they want, and that's okay. And Robert in the house says good morning and shalom, 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 Robert. Let's see. Though you don't want to mess with the people with the people with the pagan outlaw motorcycle. Gang, stupid G board. Sorry about that, Salt Checker. Just look at what is. I've never heard of that. So let's see. Pagan. Man, have the wrong glasses on for this. Pagan Outlaw Motorcycle Club. Let me switch glasses so I can read the other screen. I need to get some better glasses. I struggle a little bit here. The Pagan Outlaw Motorcycle Club was founded in Maryland in 1959. Outlaw motorcycle gang. They are involved in criminal activities with recent law enforcement actions, including arrests and shootings and pleas of guilty for armed assaults. The club has been associated with serious crimes such as drug manufacturing and distribution, as well as violent crimes with rival gangs. Well, yeah, sounds like a group that I would not want to mess with. So I'll agree with you on that. So if you're a member of the Pagan Outlaw Motorcycle Club, I'm not going to pick a fight with you. Points to conspiracy. It's true. Never thought of that. Yeah, it's kind of funny because we don't. It's like if when I was doing training for law enforcement when I was in the military, one of the things you learn very quickly is that if when there's any kind of incident, you separate your witnesses, number one, and then you interview them individually. And if they all give you the exact same story, it's a conspiracy, flat out. And so if they give you different story, and that's why the worst thing you can do, honestly, to hurt your case, and my sister, I remember she did this when she got into an accident one time. The worst thing you should do is after you get into an accident or something like that to immediately go to your friends and go, okay, we got to get our story straight. Don't do that. Because as soon as everybody says the same thing, bam, they see right through it. And it was kind of funny because my sister was like, yeah, tell him this. And I'm like, okay, whatever. All right, so happening in Dearborn, Michigan, Muslims don't care about assimilation. They're really about taking over. Well, I can't speak for Dearborn, Michigan, but generally speaking, Muslims are like any other group of the population. There are good and there are bad. And militant Islam is just as dangerous as militant Christians because religion shouldn't be militant. Muslims will turn on Christians directly once the Jews are out of the way. Okay, so you think that the Muslims are going to their plan is to eliminate the Jews and then attack the Christians? Fair enough, but I doubt it. But hey, we'll see. I remember an anime about Jesus. I do not. You tell an imam you're a Christian, and he will smile and call Jesus a good prophet. But when you bring up that Jesus was God, it's like mask falls off the imam's face. Well, that's because they do believe that Jesus was a good prophet. They genuinely believe that. Most, in fact, a good friend of mine, like, Muhammad, and not that Muhammad, obviously, but Muhammad, who is a pastor at our church, is a former imam, and we talked about that at length. And the Muslim belief about Christ, aside from the divinity of Christ and the actual event of the crucifixion and resurrection, our beliefs are not that different. They and the funny thing though is that they believe he is a prophet, but then anytime you quote something he said, they say, "Well, that's not true because that was corrupted." Well, and another thing that I would challenge Muslims with is that, well, if you think he was a prophet, then his words were the words of God. And if his words were the words of God, then please show me the preserved copy of the accurate New Testament that obviously Muslims must have in order to know all this great stuff about Jesus. Robert says, "This is America after all, not some stinking third world country." Well, that is true. Interaction through chat is the way where a live stream works. Yes, but some people can't take that, Tristan. And it says, "It is you who wouldn't have to debate with me about flat Earth. I've always made myself available. You instead created a secret channel to talk about it, the Templar or some such thing." I haven't done anything on the Templar channel in forever. And I didn't create it just to talk about flat Earth. I did one video about flat Earth on there, and I didn't even name you specifically. But yes, I have actually tried to discuss it with you. And I remember the last time we had a quote unquote debate, you basically kept saying that a vacuum can't exist next to an atmosphere, and then you just left without and so I was like, okay, so you're not interested in the conversation, even though I offered you a counter to that, involving your own understanding of water pressure and stuff, being a submariner, and you refused to address it at all. Instead, you just kept saying a vacuum can't exist next to an atmosphere. And so, if you want to have an actual discussion about it, Darren, I would love to. But you don't want to have a discussion. You just want to say, oh, go watch this guy's videos or go read this guy's book. No, make an argument yourself. And if I give you a counter, concede or defend. That's how debate works, rather than just restate your position and then run away. And if you can do that, hey, we'll have a debate sometime. Jeremiah was just going to be some great things to refute Muslim false claims, so don't dismiss him so easily. Oh, Darren dismisses me on the regular. Trust me, this is nothing new. Darren's just a troll. Trustin with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, buddy. That is definitely going into the Let's Try to Pay the Bills fund. Also, never admit fault. Don't apologize. Dearborn is where apparently mosques are broadcasting call to prayer messages at 5:30 a.m. using loudspeakers on the outside of the buildings. That could be a city ordinance issue. I don't. I mean, they might claim right to religion, but right to religion does not mean the right to break the law. Like one thing about the First Amendment that some people don't understand is that yes, you have the freedom to practice your religion, but that does not grant you the freedom to break the law in the name of practicing your religion. So, for example, you cannot perform child sacrifices just because it's your religious belief to do so, or any other kind of criminal activity. And generally speaking, most cities have noise ordinances. And if you're putting up loudspeakers and blaring out a call to prayer at 5:30 a.m. Without a permit to do so, then that could be grounds to cite the mosque. And while the Muslims might get angry and say discrimination, it's not discrimination. It's just law enforcement. Do Christian churches even bother ringing bells anymore? Not very many. Not that I mean, like, I have not heard actual church bells ringing since I was a little kid, and even then, they didn't do it at 5:30 in the morning. Generally speaking, the church bells were would ring like around 9 a.m. or so, which is when services usually started for most churches. Yes, they do. The ones that I have. Okay, so the church you go to has bells. That's cool. Around here, I never hear them. But then again, here in the deep South, it's like it's all Baptist and Methodist, and the Methodists aren't much. They used to be into the bells thing, but not so much anymore. And I don't know that the Baptists ever really were. And Mike Richards here, the best thing to come out of Columbus, Ohio, since just the best thing to come out of Columbus, Ohio. Every time you debate me on flat Earth, you are the one who pulled out. See, now you're just lying. But and then but whatever. My priest was talking about how the movement Protestants took stories out of the Bible. I assume you mean how the Protestant movement took stories out of the Bible. And your priest lied to you. The Protestants did not take anything out of the Bible. In fact, the funny thing is, the only thing that's different significantly between the Catholic and Protestant Bibles is the books known as the Apocrypha. And the interesting thing about the Apocrypha is that the Apocrypha were not canon at the time of the Protestant Reformation. And so, in fact, it was part of Martin Luther's motivation. He didn't think they should be canonized, but they were not canonized at that time. And so, as a response to the Protestant Reformation, that's when the Catholic Church canonized the Apocrypha. The interesting thing about the Apocrypha is that the Apocrypha is actually a collection of Old Testament books, and yet the true experts on the Old Testament, namely the Jews, do not recognize the Apocrypha as canonical scripture. And so the everybody except for and I don't know what the Orthodox position on it, so I can't say. I know that the Orthodox and Catholics are very closely aligned on most things. So, assuming the Apocrypha is part of the Orthodox Bible as well, then the Catholic Orthodox Bible is different than their version of the Old Testament is different than the Old Testament was at the time of Christ. Politics nothing but a dog and pony show. Trump doesn't care about the American people. Example, he just had the newly elected mayor of New York in the White House and Oval Office. Well, I would say this about that. My wife showed me the video of how Trump was so nice to him and everything, and how everybody's shocked. I wasn't shocked in the slightest, because Trump is a New York Democrat, and the MAGA people don't recognize this because they put blinders on. But Trump is an old school New York Democrat. So him congratulating a New York Democrat does not surprise me in any way, shape, or form. And the only times you just designed to debate me about flat Earth was on another channel where it was me against five other people simultaneously. You like those odds, that's why you were there. Yeah, that's why I was there. Sure, Darren. Darren, you continue with your delusions. I don't care. I sleep fine at night knowing that the Earth is a globe. I'm absolutely fine with that. In fact, by the way, Darren, let me ask you something, and serious question for a second, Darren. If I could construct an actual experiment that we could do, that I could do and you could duplicate, that could prove that the Earth was a globe, or could prove that the Earth was flat. Without seeing the results, I'm saying that the results could prove either one of those. Would you accept it, or would you come up with an excuse to why it's a grand conspiracy? Because I can. Just like he also had a Saudi prince at the White House is suspected of ordering death of that reporter and other nefarious things. Well, again, the White House, people accused Obama of having terrible people at the White House. People accused Bush of having terrible people at the White House. Because you know what? Terrible people are world leaders. And the White House is a place where world leaders gather. And so sometimes you do have terrible people over in the attempt to stop them from doing future terrible things. That's just part of politics. Now, so I'm not going to rag on Trump for having somebody in as a guest in the White House that has done bad things, because every president has had bad people in the White House. I get on Trump about him breaking the law and stuff like that, but I don't think that there's anything unusual about that. Nope, you're the one that's lying again. Okay, fine, but will you accept my challenge, or are you going to just ignore it, or probably run away, like if you haven't already? Let's see. Josiah says, ever see a feminine man not talking about a trans person, but a man who look at a woman? I'm not even sure what you're asking there. If I've ever seen a feminine man not talking about a trans person, yes. Like, in fact, there's a guy that I knew when I was in California. His name was Mike, and he was the most effeminate guy. The first thing you would think is that this guy was a flaming homosexual, but he was as straight as could be. He was a conservative Christian, a Bible thumper, blah, blah, blah. And he married a woman named Tony, who was a beautiful young black woman, and the two of them are still married to this day, some 20 years later. Trek Viewer says, I've not heard Salty lie. Darren says, it won't take long, of course. Darren, I don't understand your obsession with poisoning the well around here. I really don't. I don't know how I live rent free in your head all the time, but whatever. You aren't capable of such an experiment, so I reject the premise of the question. You don't even know what the experiment is, and you say I'm not capable of it. I guarantee you I'm capable of it. And so are you, and so is everybody else in this room. It doesn't take much. You'd have to spend maybe $100 on materials, maybe a little more, depending on how precise you want to measure, and you'd have to take a road trip. That's it. And you can do this same experiment that I proposed. And it would absolutely work, and it would be absolute proof. But you don't want to accept it because you just, you're going to say that it's somehow, why won't you accept it without even knowing what it is? I mean, to me, that's the height of intellectual dishonesty, to say that that somebody is incapable of conducting a simple experiment, and therefore you reject it. You don't even know what the experiment is, and it's an experiment that anybody can do. Ensign Tilly versus Pee Wee Herman. Well, there's an interesting fight, except that it won't last long because Tilly will sit on Pee Wee, and that will kill him instantly. Just like recently, Trump confronted with facts from any mainstream news source, he quickly calls them fake news. Go figure. That I'm sick of. I'm really, and in fact, one thing that he did that really angered me that nobody else seems to latch onto, but people don't catch this, is when he was going off. I think it was someone from like ABC was asking about the Epstein files, and he said, "Well, I'm going to answer that question, but not because of the way you asked, because you're a nasty, terrible person." Blah blah. And then he spent like the next 5 minutes going off on the reporter, and then never answered the question, of course. But the most important thing that he said in this whole rant against this reporter was repeatedly calling her his subordinate. That shows you right there that Trump has no idea what the how things work, because the press is not subordinate to the president. He kept accusing her of insubordination. Just give it up, Mike. My name is Michael. You can call me that. I don't call you Dare or something. Your name is Darren. So if you want to be respectful instead of being a dick. Anyway, you have never had a proper debate with me about flat Earth anywhere. So you don't. No, I haven't, because you always run away. You don't bother to inform yourself on the subject, or rather rely on so-called debunker channels. I do not watch I don't even know a flat Earth debunker channel. I have occasionally stumbled across a flat Earth debunking video, and I've occasionally stumbled across a pro-flat Earth video. But I don't subscribe to any flat Earth debunkers, nor do I subscribe to any flat Earthers except for yourself. At least not that I know of. So, right there, you're asserting knowledge about me that you clearly do not have. So instead of speaking from ignorance, why don't you speak from fact? If Michael J. Crawford is capable of such an experiment, it would already have been done by now. That is common sense, which you lack. Okay, so you are correct that if I was capable of such an experiment, it would have already been done, because it has already been done many times by many people. You may not know of it, because it's not one. It's actually something that I stumbled across, having nothing to do with flat Earth, but actually having to do with calculating the amount of bulge in the center of the Earth. But it is a an experiment that translates to flat Earth, and but you probably wouldn't accept the results, even though they would clearly show a globe. But notice that with all the crap that Darren is spewing, he's not once asking what the experiment even is. He's not even the slightest bit curious, because no matter what it is, he's probably looking for it right now to try and figure out what I'm thinking of, and then trying to find his prepackaged flat Earth conspiracy theory to why it's not true. What happened to Mr. Know-It-All? Chance of ever seeing? Yeah, he's had a rough go of it the last couple of weeks. But we're planning on doing a show on Friday this week. We're going to be talking about Sisu and Sisu 2. And yeah, he was busy this last Friday, but I had a lot of fun with Danny. That was a good show. And no, we have not broken up. At least not. If we have, he didn't tell me about it. He still has the ring, so he better give it back. You're right that I don't know your hypothetical experiment, but I do know you. You're not honest intellectually or otherwise. Wow, Darren, you're just spitting the venom today. Okay. I'm surprised you haven't called me fat yet. Do you have anything constructive to say, or are you just going to be a dick all day? Because if you just want to be a troll and dick off, go. If you want to know about the experiment, ask. But I don't think you actually want to know because you're afraid. Street Preacher, Mikey, please don't call me that. Schwario, good morning, Mike and chat. Okay, guys, for the last time, my name is Michael. Please call me Michael. I am not Mike. I am not Mikey. I am not Mickle. I am Michael. Charter a balloon for a round trip. Just keep going in the same direction and see what happens. Oh no, that would be too easily debunked. They just say that you actually went in a very slow circle around the Earth instead of a straight line. Schwario agrees that the Earth is a globe. Well, that's because you have something called a cerebral cortex. Hell, Ewan McGregor rode a motorcycle around the globe. Did he? I never heard about that. But no, you see, the funny thing is that There's actually two. Okay, I'll tell you what, Darren. And in fact, here's an experiment I actually proposed to Darren that he flat out rejected because he knows exactly how it would go. Because of the fact that Darren is a submariner, he knows full well the factuality of this. And this is not the experiment I'm talking about that would absolutely be definitive proof, but it would be enough to where anybody who knows anything about maritime would accept that the Earth has to be a globe. And that is, you get in your submarine or yacht or whatever you want, as your sailing vessel, and you go to the southernmost point in South America. And you leave from there, and you immediately make for the southernmost tip of Africa. And then from there, you continue in the same direction. Whether you went east or west the first time, you continue in that direction until you get back to the southernmost tip in South America. Now, there are two possibilities. One, that you did a circle around the outer edge of the earth, or two, that you made a circle around the lower part of the earth. If it was the outer edge of the Earth, then the trip would be multiple magnitudes longer than the trip around the little bit. So all you got to do is measure the number of miles that you go on that trip, and of course, the measure it would if the flat earthers were correct, then the measurement would be the entire the disk the circumference of almost the circumference of the disk of the Earth. If the globe earthers are right, then the distance would be much, much, much less. I don't know exactly what it is at that latitude and all that, but it would be a significantly smaller number. Now, I challenged Darren with that years ago, and he just refused to answer, and for good reason. He knows darn well that there is no way that a maritime adventure going around the southernmost part of the oceans would be all that long. There are also, of course, the conspiracy people that say you can't go to Antarctica, which is a lie, but hey, whatever. It's rigged by a two-party system run by corporations, global bankers. Trump should have been one-term president. He's already fractured the MAGA movement. Many may cause the Republican Party. I assume he cost the Republican Party one. Okay. So I've said this years ago, and I've said, and Trustin will back me up on this if he's still here, because I talk about it with him in private sometimes. I think this is my one conspiracy theory when it comes to Trump. I think Trump had a clear goal when he was running for president the first time, and he's following up on that goal now. And his goal is to destroy the Republican Party. That's my genuine belief. I think Trump is actually trying to dismantle the Republican Party. Now, by the way, I never thought I would say this, but if you haven't seen it, check out Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation video that she posted yesterday, because I never thought I would say that I agreed with a speech of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she lays it out. The whole fact that the Republicans and the Democrats are both destroying this country. And bravo, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for coming to your senses. But unfortunately, and she can't, she's been getting death threats and all that ever since she came out against Trump over Epstein. And so she's done. She's leaving. Josiah says, in the Orthodox Church, there are men that grow their hair out, beard and hair, to look like Jesus. Do we know what Jesus looked like? I mean, that's a genuine question. Because growing your hair and your beard out doesn't make you look like Jesus unless you already. I mean, what was Jesus' skin tone exactly? How long was his beard? How long was his hair? We don't know. I don't think the Bible ever describes Jesus's hairstyle. The next Republican election, yeah, I think the Democrats are a shoe in the next election unless they do something stupid. Lone Ranger versus Clint Eastwood. Oh, Clint Eastwood easily. Okay, I'll call you Michael from now on. Sorry, no problem, Schwario. I know you don't do it with malicious intent, unlike Darren, who seems to have run away as usual. But you know, and notice when as soon as I start, this is the hilarious. Let me double check, make sure. Yeah, nothing from Darren. As soon as I start pointing out actual scientific facts, like circumnavigating the globe, using his own references as being a submariner as my position, he runs away. He runs away because he can't deal with actual facts. So instead, now he'll come back the next time I do a live stream and talk about how I won't have a debate with him, right? Then answer me why you can't circumnavigate the globe in the proper, why is it that I can go from South America to Africa and back to South America in far less than it should take on a flat earth? But he won't do it. And that has nothing to do with the experiment that I was even going to challenge him with. In fact, now there's only one person that I've told so far what that experiment is. And I told that person if I ever have the time and the resources, it's actually not, it's the time more than anything else, because you do have to do a significant road trip in order to make the experiment work. But because you have to take certain measurements at different locations. But the as soon as I can, I will do that experiment and I will make a video on it. And the video will be called "Why Darren Wagner is Wrong," or something to that effect. Would you watch a Star Trek series with Admiral Thomas Paris giving the orders? Sure. But to be honest, Trek reviewer, I will. Heck, I'm going to watch Starfleet Academy. I mean, I'm not going to lie, even though I'm not looking forward to it. I will watch pretty much anything with the Star Trek brand name on it. I was a Trekkie since before most of you guys were born. So there's no way that I'm not going to watch a new show called Star Trek. I just wish they would do it right, and I'm hoping that Skydance, now that they're taking over, will pull the plug on the crappy Star Trek and make good Star Trek. Street Preacher puts a link to something on Wikipedia. Let me see if I can find where's the link. Oh, Darren came back. I'm so glad. Maybe he'll answer this time. I doubt it, but maybe he will. Let's see. Long Way Around, British television series book documenting the 19,000 mile journey of Ewan McGregor. Okay. Well, cool. I will check it out one of these times. I didn't even know about it. Charles Lee Ray, not Chucky without the voodoo stuff versus Dexter. Well, Dexter then. I mean, Charles Ray without Chucky is nothing. I have a pet Wendigo. Do you? Will Riker versus James T. Kirk, please. Will Riker, he's got the palm strike. That's his only move. James T. Kirk has the double flip kick, the double hand punch. James T. Kirk went toe to toe with a Gorn. Will Riker, yeah. Well, he had sex with a genderless person. I guess that's. The journey passed through 12 countries, starting the UK, right across France, Belgium, Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Ukraine, Russia, Pakistan, Mongolia, Canada, and the US. Wow, that is impressive. Must have been an awesome adventure. I'll bet that would be a lot of fun, honestly, if you could make that trip. If physically I couldn't do it, but I would love to do it. Worf versus La'an. That's a tough one because on the one hand, Worf is obviously a Klingon, physically superior to most humans, but La'an is an augment, and so she's a physically superior human. So I think that one's going to come down to fighting skill. Now, if they're unarmed, I would probably give it to La'an. But if they're using like non-projectile weapons and Worf has a bat'leth, Worf probably takes the day. The Jewish space laser lady makes a great point. I never thought her and I would agree on anything. Yeah, exactly, Black Delegation. I cannot believe this is the same lady that came up with Jewish space lasers and is now the most sensible person in Washington, D.C. I was in the bathroom, dolt. Okay. Yeah, because, and it's funny, you insult me because you think that am I supposed to know you're in the bathroom when you just disappear? Because you know what your pattern is, Darren? You make a couple of what you think are great points and then you leave. That's what you do week after week. Whenever you show up on my show, you show up for a brief time, you throw through insults, and then you leave. That's what you do. So the fact that you disappeared again is just in accordance with your established pattern. So don't call me a dolt just because I assumed you were being consistent. Instead, why don't you say something rational for once? Schwario says, be right back. Okay. Notice how he always wants to talk about flat Earth and brings it up when I come here. It's because he's convinced that the subject is a winner for him. I am convinced the subject is a winner for me, and I'm also convinced that the subject is bad for Christianity, which is why I can't stand the people like you think that it's a good idea to talk about to suggest that it's real. I think that it is a patent delusion for some. For others, and I've said this to your face, so I'm not saying anything shocking to Darren, is that I think that Darren doesn't believe it. I don't believe he actually believes in a flat earth at all. I think that he only holds that position because he likes to argue. Let's talk about your neon visuals debacle. When you used another channel's hard work and they caught it, and then you lied and said you accidentally used the wrong footage. I did accidentally use the wrong footage. Get over it. And the fact that Neon Visuals put out I'll still say it's a false DMCA because he tried to file a DMCA on a work that was an almost indistinguishable copy from the original opening credits for Deep Space Nine. I was just did a quick search for the opening credits for Deep Space Nine, and that was the first video that came up. I'm so sorry, Darren, that it's beyond your ability to think that somebody could make a mistake because you are so perfect. However, I do think that that is a false DMCA because you can't own the copyright to something that is not yours. If it was an original work, sure, but it wasn't an original work. It was clearly a derivative work at best, and it was actually just a copy of an existing work. I watch all the Star Trek shows as well, plus the comics and the audiobooks. I don't do the comics and the audiobooks as much. There's a couple of Star Trek books that I like, but honestly, mostly I just do the shows. Okay, I'm back. Had to restart my laptop. Well, I'm glad you're back, Shwario. I think Skydance will use the already produced crappy Trek to hold us over until their Trek is ready. I agree. My biggest fear though is the rumors now circulating that Skydance is working on a new Star Trek film. And it's not because I'm worried about them continuing because they already said the new film would be unrelated to all the prior Trek. That's fine. It's that Star Trek belongs on the small screen, and in fact, I think Star Trek belongs on broadcast television, not behind a paywall on a subscription service. So, I don't know if they understand that, but I hope that they learn it. I prefer Charles E. Ray, aka Chucky. Well, you can prefer him, but Dexter, I think, would take him out. What about, or imagine a Star Trek production with Bruce Campbell in it? That would be groovy. You know what? I can't imagine that without it being a farcical parody of Trek. And what? And I'm not talking about like for example, you have Lower Decks, which I enjoyed Lower Decks, but I don't think that I don't want Trek to devolve into just being comedy after comedy after comedy. I think there's a place for Lower Decks, but I think what makes Lower Decks special is that it's unique. Kind of like the problem that Hollywood tends to have, and not just with Star Trek, with any major franchise, is if they have something that's successful, they try to duplicate that over and over and over. That's why Marvel got into trouble with their over the top Marvel humor. because the humor landed, especially in Iron Man. And so they tried to up their game over and over and over with the humor. And sometimes it worked, and then it got too far. Like when we got to things like Thor, Love, and Thunder, it was just stupid at that point. So I'm glad that, like, if Fantastic Four, Thunder, and Thunderbolts are an example of what's to come, I'm glad to see the Marvels dialed it back. Liana's superhuman. I know she's Khan's ancestor. She's never displayed superhuman abilities. I know that Una has. But you see, I've seen nothing but rational. I've been nothing but rational here. Sure, whatever. As far as Laan being superhuman, yes, it has been demonstrated. Let me make sure I get the name of the episode right, since you're going to call me adult if I get it wrong. Uh, let's see. Come on. And let's see. No, that's not it. Let me go to. I'll tell you. Let me go to. Just because it's you, Darren, I'm going to go to Paramount Plus and actually see if I can find it real quick. Sign in. All right, and it's me, and we'll go to Strange New Worlds. All right, and I know it's from season 1, I believe. Um, where is it? Oh no, I think it might be season 2 actually. Well, let's see. Um, let's go to season 2 and see. Yeah. Oh no, that's lost in translation. Where is it? Ah, it must be. It must have been right the first time. It must be back at season 1. I know the episode. I just trying to. Yeah, it's season 1, episode 3, Ghosts of Illyria. In that episode, Laan and Una go toe to toe, fighting each other in engineering, and it is a stalemate. Now, Una does finally come out on top, but barely, and they even talk about it afterwards. And so, and during the fight, Laan points out how all the other kids would call her Augment and stuff because of her relation with Khan and stuff. But yes, Laan is superhuman. At least it appears that way. Lore, Lorax versus Lorax versus Cat in the Hat. Oh, Cat in the Hat easily. To tell the truth, Worf and Lon probably make a good couple. Probably mean Lon would be most like that would mean Lon would most likely die. Yeah. Well, Lon might be one of the few humans that would not be too fragile for Worf. Yeah, it's your fault for always engaging with him. He just knows it's a topic and he can use it to troll and always get a reaction. Yeah. You don't accidentally use the wrong footage. It was an HD, which DS9 is not, and a widescreen, which DS9 is not, and you enlarge your watermark to cover his. So, first of all, it said it was a Deep Space Nine opening HD conversion. It did not say it was a new work based on Deep Space Nine. But dude, I understand you want to argue with that, because the reason you want to argue about that is because you don't want to face the fact that I already stated facts that debunk your whole flat earth crap. So why don't you go back and respond to what I said before? I mean, I said I messed up. I said I grabbed the wrong footage. You just want to make it that it was somehow malicious intent on my part. Whatever. I don't care. I sleep fine at night. You go ahead and keep accusing me all day long. It's not like a major crime has been committed. All that being said, the and I still would maintain the fact that he doesn't own the copyright to something that he didn't create. You still refuse to answer simple questions about the size of the Earth because you know you're wrong. That's what I think is hilarious. You won't answer because you know you're wrong, but then you accuse me of not, not engaging you or whatever, dude. I do the comics and audiobooks because I'm an addict. LOL brings me a lot of joy. If I had more time, I probably would. To be honest, now that I have Audible, I would probably listen to more audiobooks. And in fact, I have an idea for a Star Trek book, but the problem is, I have no way to publish it. I believe Bruce Campbell has done serious roles before. I don't know. Darren says, so there's no evidence of law on the superhero. Got it. Memory Alpha doesn't mention. Oh, so since Memory Alpha doesn't say it, then that means she's not superhuman because Memory Alpha is the ultimate authority in Trek. Gotcha. And see what he does here is when I give him evidence, he says, so there's no evidence because in other words, he's just dismissing it. Even though we know that Una is superhumanly strong. I mean, if we saw her carrying around, what's his name, the Andorian, I can't remember his name for some reason, Hammer, like he was a rag doll. And we know Una is superhuman. We also and all that, and we also know that she and La'an fought to a standstill, and so, but whatever. You go on saying there's no evidence. Trust us. Got to run. Have a good one. Take it easy. You gave me no evidence. I just repeated it. If you can't, dude, maybe you have no idea what the word evidence means. I mean, with that big old brain of yours that has, well, I shouldn't say that. You don't have a big brain, you have a big vocabulary. There is a difference. You speak like you're intelligent, but you don't act like it. Well, we did get a Robocop in Star Trek. That is true. CI doesn't read the part of the post that refutes his assertion, typical Michael behavior. What did I not read that? Let's see. Let's see. I'm sorry. Let me read the whole thing for you, Darren, to make you happy. So there's no evidence that La'an is superhuman. Got it. Memory Alpha doesn't mention that she has superhuman abilities either. Una is probably holding back because they're friends. That is, go watch the episode. I don't think she was holding back. But whatever. So what you have to do is just assume that, and that's the funny thing. Well, what you're doing is in order to make it right, you have to make these assumptions. You have to, because I'm not assuming anything. I just saw the fight and said they fought to a standstill. I saw the fact that La'an refers to herself as, uh, and so I'm trying to, there's another episode where somebody refers to her as part augment. And so she is an augment, at least partially. She may not have the strength of Khan, but she probably is stronger than a typical human. She also shows the aggressive tendencies of an augment. She is plagued by the fact that she's been called an augment her whole life. But no, she's not an augment, Darren. You go right ahead thinking that. A Narn from Babylon 5 versus a Klingon unarmed. I would, from what we've seen, I would probably go with Klingon. I think they're just a little more savage. Just like DeForest Kelly before Star Trek was in many TV westerns and movies, more often than not played a heavy or a bad guy. Yes, that is very true. We did Street Preacher. I didn't know about that. Yes. So so Darren, you gonna actually address the actual flat Earth argument, or are you just gonna continue on about La'an and This is the typical Darren behavior. Darren is the expert at deflection and distraction. Notice I asked him a very straightforward scientific question in his expertise, namely maritime activity, and he will not answer. But he'll argue all day long about whether or not La'an is a superhuman, or whether or not I accidentally or intentionally use someone else's YouTube video in an introduction in one of my videos. And so, he'll do that all day long. He just won't actually argue something that has actual scientific fact behind it, because he knows it's a loser. And that's why I call you a coward, Darren, because you will only deflect and distract. You're not interested in a real conversation. You tell me all about, you can tell me all about La'an. I don't give, you know what? You may, assuming you're even still around, Darren, you may find this shocking, but La'an is not a real person. I, I know, shocking, but she's not. She's not a real person. The world, however, is a real place. And you, at least assuming you're not lying about being a former submariner, you clearly have an expertise level beyond mine as far as navigating the waters. So why don't you address it, since you are the expert? Simply put, I don't believe you. I thought I made that clear. Go ahead and do whatever experiment you like. Spend your money on it. So you weren't listening at all. Darren, you are a freaking idiot. I'm just going to say it. That's not at all what you don't even know. I was asking you a question earlier about your area of expertise, and yet you airhead. I don't know what your problem is. Why are you being such a dick? I don't know. And if you don't believe me and you hate me and you think I'm this horrible person, go away. Why do you troll me all day long? Why do I live rent free in your head? I don't get it. Why are you so obsessed with me? By the way, for you guys, just so you know, this is how obsessed Darren Wagner is with me. He not only goes to other YouTube channels and likes to talk about me for whatever reason, he also is now texting my friends, yes, my personal friends, to tell them how horrible I am and how bad my videos are. Like that's going to suddenly end our friendship, I guess. And Darren says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have missed your question. What was it?" Well, it's okay. It's a question I've asked you before, and that it is very, very simple. In fact, let me get some numbers for you so that I can make it as plain as possible. Let's see. Come on. Oh, figures. Now my keyboard decided this would be a good time to run out of battery. Let me see if I can plug it in real quick so we can get it going. No. There we go. All right, so from that's to most point in South America. All right, so here's what I would challenge you to tell me, Darren. If you were to go to Cape Horn and in South America, right, the southernmost point in South America, and then from there, you were to sail east, and you sail to Cape. I can't pronounce this properly. It's Alguhas, South Africa. All right, so you make that trip. And then from South Africa, you continue eastward back to South America. How long a trip is that? And the problem is that, and you should know, you were a maritime expert, right? So you know that the problem with that is that that trip going east from South America to South Africa and then east from South Africa back to South America is way too short a trip for you to be going around the outer perimeter of the world. Way too short. So explain that. In your opinion, what would make more sense in the bridge of the Enterprise D, a counselor or a diplomat? Honestly, I don't like either. That's one of the problems with the next gen era of Trek. Well, actually, it's not even the next gen era. It's really just next gen because you notice on Voyager you didn't have a counselor on the bridge, right? That was just a TNG thing. And I thought it was a dumb idea. I still think it's a dumb idea. The counselor should be working if you have a ship's therapist aboard, then that ship's therapist should be working in their office. They shouldn't be a bridge officer. It's funny because we don't have a communications officer in TNG. And yet, we don't even have a regular engineering officer on the bridge in TNG, right? And so it's I don't understand the way they just kind of changed everything up. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But as far as if I had to pick a counselor or a diplomat, I would probably pick a diplomat. But diplomats in Trek are usually portrayed as being somewhat ignorant as to how the real world works. So, waiting for Darren's answer, we'll see. Robert says, whatever happened to the crazy Canadian with the Asian Muslim wife Russia guy? I don't know. That's Alexander. I haven't heard of him. Invite me on sometime and I'll explain it. You don't need to come on to explain it. How long is the trip? And why is it too short to go around the outer edge of the Earth? Magic? Is the Earth not actually flat? Or are you suggesting that now that the South Pole and the North Pole are inverted, in which case you could simply make the same claim if you go from, Canada to Russia around to Europe and then back to Canada? There isn't enough space, as I've stated before in chat. It's like using a bumper sticker to communicate. Really? There's not enough space? Because, the funny thing is that you're full of crap. Look, let's see. You're just saying that because you don't want to answer. And I understand you want to come on and have this be your personal platform to speak nonsense. And I say that because every time you've come on, you've avoided it as well whenever I ask you a serious question about flat Earth. So either you can, if you can give me the Reader's Digest for it, if you can't articulate it in the chat, you can't articulate it with your mouth. You're just trying, and you'll probably end up telling me to read somebody else's work anyway because you don't have an answer. The simple fact is that the Earth doesn't actually, fit the shape you want it to for your argumentation. Let's see. Other than Worf and Tasha, we do not have regular security presence on the bridge in TNG. No. Well, no, that's not true because, well, I mean, in TNG, Worf and Tasha were the security guys. But then, of course, in Voyager, you had Tuvok. And on Enterprise, Malcolm was basically the tactical slash security guy, and so on the original series there was no tactical officer in the classic sense. Although in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they established there was a tactical station because Chekhov took over the tactical station. Um, or not, I'm sorry, Star Trek Two. Now he did in Star Trek: The Motion Picture too when he fired the torpedoes, but in Star Trek Two, Kirk specifically told him to take over the tactical station or the weapons station, something like that. I'd love to answer you. Okay, there's a lie, but you had to give me proper medium to do so. Uh huh. You're lying, Darren, because you know what? You've articulated so much in the chat already. You can't tell me, you can't give me a simple explanation to why the world, why the trip is way too short. I mean, for example, here, let me do it for you. Let's see, your maps. Look at that. I managed to put it in the chat, and I didn't even use the full extent of what you can do in the chat. Amazing, right? Now, granted, that's not a correct answer, but I was just trying to show what your answer could have been. Black Delegation says flat earthers appear to really enjoy each other's company and content. I personally think they're just in search of community and connection with others. That could be. I just wish they didn't in conspiracy theories. It's really bad for their mental health. I agree with that as well. People like Lindbergh and Eckhart or Earhart have done proven the Earth isn't flat years ago. Well, I mean, let's be real. The Greeks proved it before Christ, so you know. And see, so there's notice I put that in. That's not even the full length that a comment can be, not even close. But you know, Darren, I'm sure will have some excuse. Speaking of Earhart, some time ago, by satellite pictures, her plane might have been found finally in an island's lagoon underwater. I had not heard about that. And then Darren says, which map are you referring to? This is typical Darren being pedantic. So are you saying that you would have, okay, so, first of all, I was putting in a surrogate answer for you, my friend, because obviously I don't believe that the maps were incorrect. So whatever map you want it to be, Darren, why don't you try answering the question instead of just trying to deflect and distract? But we see security guards on the bridge in TOS. We do see security guards, but we don't have a tactical or security station. Like obviously in TNG, Yar and or Worf were always directly behind the captain, and that's basically where the security slash tactical station is. In TOS, we have established where communications, sciences, and engineering stations are on the bridge, as well as, of course, navigation and helm. And basically, it would appear in the original series that Helm also doubled as tactical because Sulu generally fired the weapons and had the little tactical gun sight kind of pop up when they went into battle stations in later seasons. So, you would say that the Helm doubles as tactical in the original series. And of course in Voyager, you had your Tuvok at tactical, and you actually had an engineering station on that bridge. But it's funny because there's no comms officer after the original series, and comms seems like it should. And the funny thing is, notice like you go back to Enterprise and you had a comms officer, right, Hoshi. But after TOS in the Star Trek timeline, there are no comms officers. That's stupid to me because comms seems like it's one of the most important things that you could possibly have, and yet it's completely ignored in after the 23rd century. And people will argue that it's because comms can be transferred to any station on the bridge. I'm still waiting for Darren to answer, but I don't think he will. If he's even still here. Oh, there he is. Let's see. No, that was a serious question. What map are you using to determine the length of the trip and is not accurate? I didn't give you the actual length of the trip. I asked you what the length of the trip is because I know that according to any map that you can come up with, it's going to be, you're going to have some problems. Any reputable map. I'm sure there's a flat Earth map out there that will give you the wrong number. But you used to navigate. Well, I mean, I know you weren't a navigator; you were a sonar guy. But at the same time, you were aware of navigation, and I'm sure you were aware of the approximate distance between the two landmarks. But if you're not going to answer, don't just say I'm not going to answer because you don't have an answer. I understand that you're trying to deflect as usual. Just answer the damn question. I think there's a reason we won't see Tactical Station TOS Bridge is the camera usually there for filming. Actually, I don't think it was ever in the design. And Gorilla in the house says, Kapla, I'll be lurking when I'll make some Chinese fried chicken wings. Seems a little early for Chinese fried chicken wings, but enjoy. If I was doing TNG today, I would have Data be comms officer. He would also be records officer. That would actually make sense. Data would be an excellent comms officer because he can no doubt speak pretty much every language known. And he wouldn't need, like, if there was a language that he didn't know, he could just download the database and then know it instantly. So the problem is with Data is that, like, they even established in Encounter at Farpoint, they established that he can search Starfleet databases remotely just in his head. And yet then he just stops doing it because, Data becomes omniscient at that point. You asked why the length of the trip is shorter than it should be. I want to know what tools you use to come to that conclusion. That's reasonable. Simple logic, my friend. All right. I don't have a. Do I have? I don't have my globe handy. If I did, then I would show you a simple demonstration. But if assuming that the Earth is a disk, a flat disk, right? Then I would dare say that going around the outer perimeter of the disk, which is what you would need to do for this trip that we're talking about, would be somewhat different than if I have a globe and you're circumnavigating the lowermost portion of the globe, which is a much shorter distance. So, what I asked you specifically was what is the distance? Which, I understand if you don't know off the top of your head because you don't have it all memorized, but we can look at some maps if you want and try and figure it out. But the problem is that you don't understand how to answer a basic question. And instead, what you want to do is deflect and stretch this out and come up with all sorts of ways to try and avoid the question completely. How about you just tell me, why is it that it doesn't take weeks and weeks and weeks to go around that trip in comparison to what it should? Let's see. They need to marinate for a couple hours. Okay. Salty Trekker, it seems like Darren is from the same school of thought as Trump. Confronted with facts is fake news. I would tend to agree 100% with that. You know. So let's see. If we go to Google, I'm just curious. Uh, what is the distance traveling east from South Africa to South America? Okay. Traveling east from South Africa to South America crosses the South Atlantic Ocean. The distance depends on specific start and end points. For example, straight line distance from the southern tip of South Africa to the southern tip of South America is approximately 7,000 miles. All right, so that's actually okay. So there's trip number one, 7,000 miles. If you're going from the south tip of and I'm assuming that's probably gonna be the longer trip though. So that's going from South Africa to South America. Now, let's see, how far is it at being west from south to south? Okay, so traveling westward. So traveling west from South Africa to South America is a long distance with straight line flight distance to Venezuela being approximately. I'm not talking about Venezuela. I want to go to, let's see, uh, South Africa to South America is probably okay. 5,380 miles. All right. So if that's true, then let's see. So that means that, not thinking straight, that'd be about roughly, we'll just say 12,000 miles then round trip is what, or all the way around is what they're saying. Now, let's see. To flat Earth, how is a trip around the South Pole? All right. So, if you go by the flat Earth map, that same trip would be between 49,000 and 78,000 miles. So that's a magnitude of about 4 to 5 times greater. So, uh, ex- so let me ask you, Darren, do you think that the trip from South America to South Africa and then from South Africa to South America is close to 50,000 miles or closer to 12,000 miles? Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so you're asking using a geocentric. Let's see. The reason why the trip is short is because ships tend to travel in straight lines rather than lines of latitude. Okay. So first of all, I'm not going. I'm not using a geocentric model. This isn't the 13th century. If anything, I would be using a heliocentric model. But at any rate, I understand that you just want to throw fancy words out there to make people think you're smart. In fact, you're doing the opposite right now, Darren. But yes, you're right that they go in straight lines. Most people don't, just like, guess what? Newsflash. Most people that walk from one part of your house to another don't follow the exact diagram on the blueprints to what direction each door faces. You cross across the room to make the most direct path. Sure. I mean, that's just stupid common sense. But there's a big difference between 12,000 miles and 78,000 miles. And you know full well that the Earth, it's not a 78,000 mile trip. You know that. You're just not going to confront that fact. I'm at least trying to dig up some facts for you. You're not even doing that. You're just trying to diffuse and deflect. I think Data was the records comms officer. I think he would be in a red uniform and sitting in Troy's chair, which would mean you could slide either Tasha or Worf down the operations station. You could, but I like the idea of having the tactical officer where Worf and Tasha were because that makes sense. They have the bird's eye view of the bridge, so if anything happens on the bridge, they're ready for action. But and they also have an unobstructed view of the viewing screen, which is also important. So I like their position. If their back was to the view screen or their back was to the bridge because they were at the ops station, then something could happen on the bridge without them being aware, or something could happen on the view screen without them being aware. What about the astronauts that have gone into space and Shatner's trip into space a few years ago? None of them have said the Earth was flat. Well, you have to understand that's all a conspiracy. See, this is exactly what I expected. He only gets the courage to have the discussion if his opponent is at an inherent disadvantage. In this case, chat versus speech. You are truly a lion of the internet. See, and this is exactly what I expect, Aaron, because since you can't answer, you just bitch about the format because you don't have an answer. If you won't, do you think the maps are all wrong? Or do you think that it really is a 78,000 mile trip? I mean, that's a simple question. You don't need to have 78 lines of text to write that. You can write that in a few words. I think maps are wrong. I think that the world the trip would be closer to 50 to 70,000 miles. You used to be on a submarine. You know the distances, or at least you should. So let's hear it. I was refuting. Referring to the op station where Data usually sits. Yeah, his back is to the bridge. That's not a good place for a security person. Okay, equalize the format. All right, very well. From South M into South Africa, and sorry if I'm spelling things wrong. I'm sure you'll get mad at me for it, Darren, but I don't give a crap. Continuing on in the same. There's my argument equalized in your format. Happy? Of course, he'll just say, I just need to give him my platform. Nice Dr. Doom mask, by the way. Oh, thank you. I made that in my 3D printer years ago. I'm hopefully I talked to Creality because I was having problems with my main 3D printer, and then when I was working on trying to get it fixed, they were going to replace the printer, but then I ended up in the hospital. You guys know that a few months ago, and after that, I kind of lost track of things. And I just got back in touch with the folks at Creality. Nice people. I mean, a Chinese corporation, but they're and the printer is out of its warranty at this point. But they're being very nice about it. They just sent me a shipping label to send the printer back to them so that they can send me a replacement, even though they by no means have to. So I truly appreciate that from them. So hopefully that means I'll be able to do some 3D printing again once the printer comes. Elon Musk, very rich and private person. I think if the Earth was flat, he would have said so a long time ago. No, you have to understand, Robert. It's a conspiracy among everyone. Every government, every space agency, and every private citizen who has the means to prove that the Earth is not flat is in on the conspiracy. It's the greatest conspiracy in the history of humanity. What track is the trip taking? Irrelevant. Straight line path. I already told you. Just a straight line going east from the tip of South America to the tip of South Africa, and then continuing in the same direction. So if we'll start moving east. So from South Africa we go east back to South America. And I say that the trip will be approximately 12,000 miles. And it's a rough approximation because I'm using Google. I'm not charting a course using maritime maps or anything, which you probably have access to. I do not. However, according to the flat Earth disk model, that same trip should take closer to. Well, of course, you can't go a straight line because you'd cross over. Well, let's see. If we look at, let me bring up a picture of the flat Earth real quick. I don't need. Let's see. Let's just get flat Earth and go to images. All right. So if we look at the most common, let's see. I'm trying to find what most people think of as the flat Earth model. Yeah, I have that flat Earth model in Steam, but it looks like so. Yeah, it's still a straight. Well, it would be a straight line to go one way, but then to go back, you would have to basically go. We'll just say, okay. So here's the trip. I'll show you. Let me do this because I want to be fair to you, Darren. Let me open image in new tab so I'll share it with you. And da, 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 da. share screen, window, blah, 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 bloop. Bring that in. All right, and what I'm going to do is, I know this, I'm trying to remember how to minimize, crop, that's what we want to do. Crop this image to approximately there, and approximately there, and approximately there. And we enter. What do we do? Okay, so now we have a smaller version of. Okay, so here's a rough map of the flat Earth. And so, what I am suggesting is that we start our trip right here, right? We're going, or actually, I said we're going to go eastward. So we'll start our trip right here. This is the southern tip of South Africa, right? And you can make a straight line trip. You can see from there. Well, I'm pointing with the mouse, like you can see. I don't know if you can see my pointer; it's kind of small. But from here, we go directly to the southernmost part of South America, right? So that's a pretty easy straight line trip. Now, where it gets a little complicated, bring the map down, is the longer leg of the trip. We're going to end up going around, and so we're going to go from here to New Zealand to Australia and then back to Africa. Do you see that? That's our route. Okay. So I'm saying you're going from South Africa to the southernmost tip of South America to New Zealand to Australia and then back to the southernmost tip of Africa. And I'm saying that that trip is roughly 12,000 miles. You would have to concede that according to Flat Earth model, that trip would be roughly 70,000 miles. So so tell me why why is it that if you actually made that trip, if you got in your submarine and you made that trip, why would it be anything other than 70,000 miles? Benny Hill versus Captain Kangaroo. Well, Benny Hill, uh, is the perverted deceased comedian from the UK. Captain Kangaroo is a staunch military officer with the rank of captain. So I give it to Captain Kangaroo. On flat Earth model, you wouldn't be traveling due east; it would be north. That's irrelevant. I'm saying eastward. That's just to give us a direction to move. Okay, so I gave you the route. So hopefully, and I know you posted this before I gave you the route. So now that I've given you an actual route, and you can make a straight line to each one. So straight line from South Africa to South America, straight line from South America to New Zealand, straight line from New Zealand to Australia, straight line from Australia back to South Africa. You might have to dodge an island here and there, but that's not going to, I'm sure you can figure it out. And that would actually make your trip as short as possible, but still going on the outer section of the disk of the Earth, as opposed to just going there and straight back. You still have to go around the outer edge. And so, based on your models, that should be a 48 to 78,000 mile journey. According to the globe, it should be roughly 12,000 miles. Again, just answer the question instead of trying to get pedantic about it. You know what I'm asking for. You're just delaying at this point. I wonder how would it change TNG if they brought in Dwight Schultz earlier. I don't think that much because while Dwight Schultz's character was fun, Barkley, I think that he was not a main character. He never was. I mean, he was in a few episodes and one of the movies, and in the movie, it was just a cameo. So I don't think it really would have made that big a difference. I'm in a baking mood. What else should I bake? How about some brownies with marijuana in them? Say in season two, when Jordy took over engineering, Well, the thing is that I mean, you could have brought him in any episode to be another engineer, but I like I said, I don't think it would have been a major change in the dynamic of the show. The biggest problem with TNG, and Barkley was an improvement on some of this, but the biggest problem was that there was no inter-character disagreement. Generally everybody just held hands and sang "Kumbaya" all the time because it was supposed to be this perfect future where everybody loved each other, and that was boring. Why are you moving the map off the screen? I'm just moving it around to make it for points of clarity, dude. What are you grabbing a measuring stick and trying to measure this map? I'm sure you've got a dozen flat Earth maps right around you. Doesn't look right all at all. The Earth is round. I know it doesn't look right because it's inaccurate, but this is what flat earthers believe. Well, actually, that's not true. This is not a perfectly accurate flat Earth map, of course. But let me see if I still have. It's actually kind of a neat program, and I'm surprised that people like Darren don't talk about how awesome it is. Go exit there, go to my library. There it is. I have to reinstall it because I haven't used it in a while. So it's downloading now. See what he's done? He's managed to change your theology stream into another flat earth. I'm just having fun, so it's all right. If he can actually prove his point, I'd be more than happy to listen to him. Okay, there we go. The mistake you're making is the routes. Ships travel in straight lines, not along the curved lines of latitude. He keeps moving the map. He'll eventually circle back around. So, for example, if you were going from the trip of South Africa to the Horn of Africa, from South America to the Horn of Africa, you would travel along the eastern coast of South Africa or South America in a northeasterly direction. So what you're saying, yeah, well, I see where like that's how you would do it, sure, because that would be a straighter path if you're looking at the map right there. For from a global perspective, that wouldn't make much sense. The shorter path would be to go straight across using the line of latitude. Let's see. Yeah, that's fine. Um, when Shario says Captain Kangaroo versus Colonel Sanders. Well, that's an interesting one. A lot of people might want to give it to Colonel Sanders because he's a higher rank, but Captain in the Navy is the same as a Colonel in the other armed forces. So let me turn off that audio here. That's yeah. And where is that? I can't even find the stupid thing.
Every corner of the world.
Why am I not seeing it?
Through the time.
All right, let me try this. That's weird. It was like I was definitely running, but I couldn't see it anywhere, which means it was probably like on. It shouldn't be on the other monitor. That's not even active right now. Let me. Come on. Man, now things are okay. All right, display settings. Bear with me. Oh, yeah, it is showing that one. So, disconnect this display. I don't know why it was. All right, keep settings. It was trying to display it on a display that's not even connected to my computer right now. Now we can remove that. And now let me try running that again. And let me tell you now. Okay, yes. Let's make it. There we go. Play. All right. So it's loading now. Let me switch screens here. So for
Since the Victorian age, humanity.
okay, and we'll go to share, stop screen share. All right, window, bada bing, share. There we go. So this is the Flat Earth Simulator. But this was actually put out by, I can't remember the name of it, but some Flat Earth group. They're supporters of the Flat Earth concept. This is not put out as a tongue-in-cheek, make fun of it kind of thing. Why don't I just get a good telescope and keep watch on the INS station? Oh, that's all fake. All right, so this is an interactive model of the flat Earth. It's actually pretty neat if you were to believe in such a thing. So we'll see if when we're looking at that, what Darren has to say. But yeah, so we can see here's the sun. They say that the sun is magically only lights up part of the Earth, and they have no explanation, of course, for why is it that during peak summer in the southern hemisphere, how is it that the sun is lighting up the entire South Pole when the South Pole is the entire circumference of the Earth? But that's a whole other thing. Ronald McDonald versus Colonel Sanders. Oh, come on. Colonel Sanders versus Captain Kangaroo is at least a fair fight. The Wendy's chick could take them both. It's easy to see the ISS when it's against the full moon. Okay, that's probably true. I would have traveled 63 miles to the dispensary, and I would have to deal with the baby mama for having taken the kid to the dispensary. Okay, well, just a suggestion. Well, a flat Earth stream is way better than my congressman sent me a boilerplate letter stream. Well, I'm glad that you think that's better. Instead of having an argument in the chat, come up with face to face. I don't want him on here face to face. He's been begging me to let him come on this whole time because he thinks it's unfair that he has to put it in the chat. But if he can't articulate a position at all, why should I have him come up here? So far, Darren has not articulated a single position, only that I'm wrong or asking me to give more information that's irrelevant. We see all the time a woman goes into labor in flight from Hawaii to Los Angeles and the plane diverts to Alaska because it's closer. It only makes sense on a flat earth model. Really, we see that all the time? I really? Okay. And okay, so let's see. I don't know if this map will cover it goes into that level of detail, but let's see. If we go to over here. Now, the funny thing is that man, I can't even see Hawaii here. But what you're talking about, let me actually we'll just close this because Darren's not going to answer anyway. Let's see, move, yes. We go back and flat Earth. We'll close that. So, if you are to look at, let's see, a flight. All right. See if I can find a good image of it. Here we go. All right. So, what Darren's talking about is that he's suggesting that if a flight diverts from Hawaii to Alaska, that somehow that means that it's flat Earth. Now I'm going to show you. This is see if I open this one up. This is a decent image of what we're looking at. And we'll do share screen, window, leave this, and add to scene. And we'll crop. Where's the crop button? Always lose it. Frame, crop, there it is. All right, so if we take that there and that there. All right. All right, so this is a flight path here that you can see, typical flight path from Tokyo to Honolulu, and then you can see the continuing line from Honolulu into the U.S. Now, Alaska is directly above Honolulu in this particular, from this angle. So if a flight is taking off from Honolulu and a woman goes into labor and they divert the plane to Alaska, then yes, on a global model, Alaska is still a little closer. So, so much for that argument. But even if, and so it doesn't only make sense on a flat Earth model. It just you don't want to take into account the curvature of the Earth because a lot of people get confused that and you use the old stereotype that people believe like Hawaii is just off the coast of America or something when it's actually about halfway to Japan. And also that Alaska is very far east. So whatever you want to play that game, you play that game. Captain Kangaroo versus Sergeant Bob Ross. Well, Bob Ross would simply paint a picture and then get punched in the face by Captain Kangaroo. Daniel Tiger versus Tony the Tiger versus Tigger. Well, I think Tony the Tiger would win that one for sure. Tigger would just be bouncing around until Tony ate him. And Daniel, same thing, just wouldn't be much of a fight. I just looked up at the sky, and guess what? I didn't see. I don't see the moon. If the Earth is flat, then why isn't there now? Why isn't it there now? Yeah, the moon should. Well, actually, here's a better question as far as the moon is concerned. Because there are explanations that they try to use that, the moon is hovering only 25 miles. The moon is a tiny little thing. I think it's like 25 miles across and it's only like 25 miles in the sky. And so then the moon is floating up there somehow. And it's only visible from the area directly under it, right? So, and it's as it's going around the outer edge of the Earth. Now, here's the bigger question, though, is that if the moon is that close and that small, then there's one thing that's no denying, and that is that someone in Los Angeles and someone in New York at, say, midnight Central Time or midnight Mountain Time, either one, could both see the moon at the same time. However, despite the fact that they could both see the moon at the same time, they both see the same face of the moon. Meaning the moon, and by the way, any perspective that you have on Earth, you ever see the moon, you only see one face of the moon. Now, you could argue the moon is a flat disk itself, except that we can see that it's not a flat disk. Get a very cheap telescope, and you can see that the moon is obviously not a flat disk. But if the moon is spherical and we all see the same face of the moon, that means the moon cannot be close to us. But if the moon's not close to us, that breaks the flat Earth model. So, because if the moon is actually, millions of miles away, then the problem there is that means that it should be visible everywhere all the time. Same with the sun. I haven't been begging, merely suggesting. Oh, sorry, suggesting. Crying that it's unfair that you can't articulate, even though you're the most articulate person I've ever known. In Archie Bunker's famous words, Darren is a meathead. I'm afraid you are incorrect, Salty. Alaska is literally along the way on a flat Earth map. Well, it depends on which flat Earth map, because you guys can't agree on that either. When it comes to flight from Hawaii to Los Angeles, I have visual aids to demonstrate it. Yeah, I have visual aids too. See, it's on the screen right now. Whoop-de-doo. And you know what? I don't see flights constantly being diverted from Hawaii to Alaska. You know, let me see. How often are flights diverted from to while flying from Hawaii to LA? Flights from Hawaii to Los Angeles are rarely diverted to Alaska, as it is not a direct flight path. Diverting to Alaska is not a typical outcome for this route, which is a relatively short trans-Pacific flight. Instead, if a diversion is necessary, the plane would most likely divert to another airport in Hawaii or California. I guess it doesn't happen all the time, but whatever. And I know you're probably going to say, well, why trust Google? Because Google is obviously in the globe Earth conspiracy, right? So diversion makes no sense on a globe. The diversion makes no. The diversion doesn't happen. That's the thing. You're acting like there's constantly. This is the epitome of the straw man argument. You're basically setting up that all these flights are being diverted from while they're going from Honolulu to Los Angeles, and they're suddenly being diverted to Alaska. But there's no, you show me the evidence that that's even happening. When was the last time a flight got diverted? Multi Gunman says hi. How you doing? I'm doing fine. I'm just having some fun with my favorite flat earther, who will not make a single argument except. Well, he has. I'll give him this. He's trying to say that flight paths don't make sense, even though they do. I guess the folks at the Boston Tea Party were crying about taxation. So you're comparing your crying about not being on here to the Boston Tea Party. Nice. You're all wrong. Kurogan scientists have proven the Earth is cube-shaped. Well, that's Kurogan scientists. Now, there's another inherent problem with chat versus speech. You can't read very well and can't follow discussions very well. Wow, Darren. And you're a dick. They were probably trying to tax the tea, and they actually had just stolen. Here's the thing about the Boston Tea Party. It has nothing. You see, don't fall for it. This is just Darren trying to throw another red herring into the mix to try and distract from the fact that he has no argument. He's actually. It's hilarious how obvious it is when you look at it. Darren cannot make an argument to actually support himself, so instead, now he's trying to compare himself to the Boston Tea Party in order to change the conversation into that. So please don't fall for it, Stan. And you're demonstrating my poor word choices. What poor word choice? Because I said crying. Because now he wants to make the discussion about crying. Because I said crying instead of, bitching or moaning or complaining or suggesting or whatever word you would prefer to use, Mr. Big Vocabulary. I don't give a crap. You're still not answering your arguments. Instead, you're trying to distract, you're trying to deflect, you're trying to do anything you can to get this off the topic because you can't answer it. What's obvious here is your inability to have the conversation in a way that you demand it. No, what's obvious here is your inability to articulate an argument. And the funny thing is, Darren, you're proving my point. All you got look at Robert here. Darren is reminding me of one-legged man in a butt kicking contest. He really is. He doesn't have. He doesn't have the wherewithal to actually make an argument. He doesn't have the ability to articulate an argument because even though he is the most articulate person I know, he knows that he has no facts on his side. And so instead, he has to turn it into personal insults. He has to turn it into argument over whether or not I use the best word choice in making an off the cuff remark about something. That's more important to him about than the actual argumentation because he has no argumentation. This is why you don't have 15,000 subscribers anymore and falling. Yes, Darren, that's why. Yeah, and you know what? I know you seem to think that that's like some incredible zinger that's going to hurt my feelings. Newsflash, it doesn't. You know, yes, I used to have more subscribers, and when I had more subscribers, you know why? It was because I was doing exactly what people like the Critical Drinker and Neurotic and Doomcock do, and being all negative about all things that are in the media and talking about how woke everything is and all that. In other words, I was being dishonest, and I realized it. And when I changed my ways, people couldn't take it. Because let's be real. If Critical Drinker suddenly started giving actual, real reviews of movies instead of his little diatribes about how everything sucks, then his subscriber count would plummet. If Nerdrotic started actually being a reasonable minded person in his shows, then his numbers would drop. If Doomcock stopped trying to have the anger of 1,000 suns or whatever he says these days, then his numbers would drop. That's just how it works. Hate sells, and I'm not selling it anymore. That's why my numbers dropped. And you know what? I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm proud of it. That's funny because I'm seeing you prove my point here. That's really good, Darren. Well, going after Anna, that Star Wars girl, was not probably the smartest thing to do. I don't even know what you're talking about in that particular case. I really don't. But notice how he's again trying to desperately change the topic. He's doing everything he can to change the topic. Now he wants to talk about Anna, that Star Wars girl, which I don't even know what he's talking about. As far as maybe I said something critical of her at some point, and I guess he thinks it was a bad idea. I don't care if it was a truthful comment. It was a truthful comment. I don't care if it butt hurt you. But if you want to actually answer, let's get back on topic for a second. My goodness, Darren, do you even have the capability of having a conversation? Without respect, we must reject. Yeah, that was one of Doomcock's big things, and of course, I used it in that one song that's still on my channel, but with Piano Dean. But yeah, the go on, Pringle. You have to open the door a little more. She's back. Darren, it's really funny, and I mean that. It's actually it's so transparent now. It's so obvious when you do this. You used to fool me a little bit with how articulate you were, with your incredible vocabulary, your seeming intelligence, and all that. Now you don't fool me anymore. Now I realize that at best you're a paper tiger, right? There's nothing there. You have nothing except insult and attempts to distract. Have fun with that. Says, of course you don't remember. Well, I don't know specifically what you're talking about. No. I know that I've said things to and about that Star Wars girl in the past. But what you're specifically referencing, I don't know. Because it's been years since I've even mentioned that name. So I don't know what specifically you're talking about, and nor do I care really. What I care about is you giving an answer, which notice, and everybody, by the way, Darren, everybody here does notice this, that you are not answering. Instead, you're trying to turn the conversation into about my failings or what you perceive as my failings. It hurt you, not me. I don't know what you're talking about. Again, maybe it hurt me. Maybe it didn't. I don't know what you mean. And why don't you get back to the topic instead of trying to talk about that Star Wars girl, which is an irrelevant topic? Dan said, "Oh, you're talking about something old." Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, to be honest. For those of you that don't know, that Star Wars girl is a YouTuber who's part of the former group of people known as the Fandom Menace. I don't know if they call themselves that anymore. I don't care, but And she and I've had some disagreements on things. She and I've had some agreements on things. But I don't know what Darren is talking about specifically that I said to her, about her, or whatever, that apparently hurt me or hurt her or whatever. I don't know. And that's it. Let it all out. Show the fine folks who you are. No, you're doing that just fine. Thank you. Mercer in the house says hi. How you doing, Mercer? Hope you're doing well. I remember when Space Lab came out of orbit. If the Earth is flat, then why didn't it remains all come down in a central space area instead of all different places, Darren? Oh, he'll probably tell you Space Lab was a hoax. Saying hi to Mercer. Anna, she just had a baby. Did she? Oh, well, congratulations. I didn't know that. I remember I was your first super chat, but I feel the channel has changed. No longer is fun. I still like you, but sometimes I feel like no one can give a fair debate. Fair enough. But, the thing is, Mercer, and I get it, the channel has changed. And I used to talk just about nerdy stuff, and I used to be on the hate train along with people like the aforementioned Star Wars girl and Doomcock and Nerdrotic and all those guys. And I don't do that anymore. Yes, some people find that disappointing. And if you can't watch the channel because you only want to have somebody talk about how woke something is, like that's a well, I guess it is a four-letter word, but you know what I mean. Like it's a derogatory term. Then yeah, you're going to have to go elsewhere because that's not me. And Mercer, you may want to check out. I did put out a video this week. It was a review of Sisu Road to Revenge. That's on the Salty Plus channel. So check that one out. See, maybe you'll like it. Which Anna? Anna, that Star Wars girl. And Darren says, all right, now I really do have to go because he finally ran out of crap to say and he still has not answered the question. I want everybody to notice that Darren is running away again. And so you take care, Darren. I hope you have fun with that. And once again, what did Darren notice? And what he does is exactly his MO. I back him into a corner with an argument about the trip around the world. So I bet you he was probably trying to think of a clever answer for it, couldn't come up with one. So what is his answer? That I somehow attacked Anna, that Star Wars girl, and I'm a jerk, and my channel is falling apart. Blah blah blah. That's his answer to why the trip around the world doesn't make sense from a flat Earth model. That is the epitome of cowardice. And so, good luck with that, Darren. Good luck. As long as you're still you, that's okay. And it says, let's see, I've been rewatching, or I think that's rewatching Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. That movie is smarter than you think. It really feels like there's players controlling those characters. Yeah, the players are called the writers. I don't think it's that smart a movie. I think it's kind of a dumb movie, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a bad movie per se. It's a fun movie, but it's a dumb movie. It really does feel like it's just a D&D campaign and somebody took some notes and turned it into a screenplay. That's what it feels like to me. And maybe to you, that's the charm of the movie. That's great. Whether you or not you enjoy a piece of entertainment is entirely subjective. I happen to think that this is a stellar piece of art. A lot of people will look at this and laugh at the primitive art style and the simplistic storytelling and all that. I get it, but this is a product of the 1960s. And yes, by the way, this is real. But the and so it's all about your relative perspective. That's one of the reasons I really enjoyed the Fantastic Four movie. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say the Fantastic Four movie is the most intelligent, deepest cinematic adventure ever made, because it's not. But I enjoyed the crap out of it. Who is your favorite live action version of Gambit? Is there more than one? I mean, I would say Deadpool and Wolverine, obviously, but I don't know. Is there more than one? That I can't think of another. Oh, there's the crappy one from X-Men Origins Wolverine. That was really bad. But Let's see, Deadpool, Wolverine, X-Men Origins, yeah, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, I would say the Channing Tatum appearance in Deadpool Wolverine was my favorite of the two that I know of. Because I can't remember the other actor that played him. That didn't feel like Gambit at all. But whatever. By the way, what's the new mask on the top of the Stormtrooper helmet? Is that Doctor Doom? It is. It's not new. It's old, actually. It's just I was cleaning out some things and happened to stumble across it, and I was like, "Hey, that's relevant these days." So I decided to put that up there next to Herbie. But yeah, that's an old. You can find that particular mask is a dime a dozen as far as 3D printers are concerned. I want to, and I've been meaning to. I just haven't had time. I want to model a an original Doom mask of my own that would fit on my big old noggin, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. There was one in the Wolverine movie. Yes, that's the X Men Origins Wolverine. That's what I was talking about. He had one cool scene in the bar, and they gave him the red eye glow. Yeah, but just because they gave him the red eye glow doesn't mean he was a better character. Mercer says, I mean, the idea of Paladin being higher level than the characters, he obviously can't stick around and it's fun. Oh, and hi, can they ask dead corpses questions and arbitrary? It kind of running on there. I'm not sure, but the fat dragon might be my favorite dragon. Reminds me of my cat Normal. Well, the fat dragon I thought was silly and kind of that was kind of almost a Marvel esque problem where you take away what should be real drama in place of humor. I get it. If you enjoyed it, that's great. As far as the paladin being a higher level, yeah, but paladins start at level one just like everybody else. So I personally, I've never ever heard, been walking around and saying, "Ooh, you must be a level 8. I'm not taking you on." That's never been a part of my vocabulary. But I get it. It's just a D&D game that somebody took and adapted into a screenplay. But I'm not going to call that intelligent. I'm going to call it clever. And for if you're into playing D&D, I can see how that which I used to be when I was a kid, but I haven't played D&D, and well, I played it once with James Lore Reloaded a few years ago, but other than that, not since gosh the 80s. So not my thing anymore. So I would much rather watch if I was going to watch a medieval adventure, which I'm not into fantasy adventure films like all that much, but if I was going to watch one, I would rather one that takes itself seriously, like Lord of the Rings. I wonder what version of Doctor Doom we'll get in Avengers Doomsday. That's a great question. There's a lot of interesting theories on that. I personally think that we're going to get a Tony Stark variant or a corrupted version of Tony Stark from the MCU. When I say that, I mean it's possible. Let's say because the last thing that Tony did was use the Infinity Stones, and notice that the last time we saw Tony, his face was pretty jacked up. Now, perhaps I'm just saying from a story breaking perspective, what if somehow Tony survived the snap, or in another universe Tony survived the snap, and having that much power coursing through him made him obsessed with because remember, what was Tony all about? Protecting the world using force. He wanted to create the armored legion using the Ultron program to basically protect the Earth against any kind of invaders. So when he held the Infinity Stones, he held infinite power in his hands. That would be that would be the ultimate way he could protect the Earth, would be to have that kind of power. So if Tony in some other universe survived the snap, or if Tony in this universe is corrupted and somehow survived the snap, how about he decides, I need to, I need to harness some ultimate power. How am I going to do that? And so he finds out through exploring the multiverse somehow that Franklin Richards holds that kind of power. And if he can just figure out a way to siphon off Franklin Richards' power, then he could have ultimate power again. And this kind of sets us up for Doomsday, etc. So that's kind of my, because I don't think that he is, in fact, Victor Von Doom. I think he is Tony Stark, because they've hinted at the fact that he will that Robert Downey Jr. is going to play Doom for now, but like that somebody else is going to play Doom in the future. And if that's the case, then I would dare say I think the future Doom is going to be the true Victor Von Doom, someone who should be Eastern European, and the ruler of Latveria and all that, but not necessarily the snarky Tony Stark guy. Them Thembershad is a real dragon in Forgotten Realms where they are in the film. Okay. Is Thembershad fat in Forgotten Realms? Before Dungeons and Dragons, the main character in TV Western Have Gun Will Travel was called Paladin. Well, Paladin has always been a term for a holy warrior. It's not a D&D exclusive term. D&D just borrowed it. And so I don't know what the order. Let's see if we can find it. Let's see. Let's see. Word paladin originates from the Latin term paltrinus, meaning of the palace, which initially referred to an official or guard of the emperor's palace on the Palatine Hill in Rome. It evolved through Italian paladino and French paladin to denote one of Charlemagne's 12 chief knights in medieval literature, and eventually came to mean any chivalrous hero or champion of the cause. So there you go. Word's been around for a long time. I didn't know that. Of course, Lord of the Rings is the GOAT, but the D&D movie is like Men in Black for fantasy, smart and funny. I'll say funny. I'm not going to say smart. I'm sorry. I just don't see it as that smart. It literally is just cut and paste from a typical D&D adventure. It didn't have any real deep themes to it. It didn't have any really, intelligent storytelling. It was just a fun movie. And again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I said that about Sisu and Sisu Road to Revenge. Those movies are not deep. They are not smart, but they are a lot of fun. And so it's one of those things that people confuse the terms. And I'm not trying to talk down to you, Mercer. I'm just saying you clever and smart are not the same thing. And maybe you don't mean smart in the way that I'm thinking smart, but maybe we need to clarify terms. But to me, when I think of a smart film or an intelligent film, I think of a movie like Star Trek II. And Star Trek II has got some of the deepest themes of any of the Star Trek movies while still having some of the most riveting action sequences. The whole theme of becoming older and death and life and the inevitability of something. It's just such a powerful statement on so many levels. And the funny thing is that, like, in order to truly appreciate Star Trek 2, you would need to go back and read Moby Dick and Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno. That's some heavy reading for a dumb sci-fi action flick. That's a sequel, no less. Where's the body left after he died at Endgame? We never see it. We only see them like putting his little arc reactor on a float and throwing it out in the lake. We never see his body. Or is it assumed? No, it wasn't vaporized because remember, Tony was lying there still with the and with the I think the Infinity Gauntlet never came off of him, but he was still lying there as he was dying, and Pepper was talking to him as he was dying supposedly. Looking forward to a new Star Trek project written by the guys that wrote D&D. If it's written by the guys who I haven't heard anything concrete on it. I've only heard a couple of rumors here and there. So if it is written by the guys that wrote D&D, that is not a good sign to me because that tells me that they're going to go for comedy. And I think that a new Star Trek film needs to take itself seriously. Star Trek is added, Star Trek comedy works, don't get me wrong, but Star Trek is gold when it's serious. If you look at what the truly great instances of Trek, whether you look at Balance of Terror, Star Trek II, Star Trek VI, Best of Both Worlds, oh god, Chain of Command, the really Scorpion, the really great Trek through the years. It's always the serious Trek. Yes, Trouble with Tribbles and Star Trek IV and Lower Decks are a lot of fun, but great Trek is not silly Trek. At least in my mind. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a silly Star Trek movie will make a ton of money and I'll be proven wrong. But I would like to see them actually do something that they take serious. Meaning he could have survived, maybe faked his own death, amnesia, lots of options to resurrect Tony in the comic book. Oh, yeah. Well, when you're talking about superheroes and Infinity Stones, there's not much you can't do, right? Like, who's to say that, say Tony's soul is trapped in Soul World right now, in the Soul Stone, and then when Steve Rogers returned the Soul Stone to Red Skull, which I would have loved to have seen that. Perhaps Steve was then ejected from Soul World, and that's when he realized he had to gain infinite power again. With in Have Gun Will Travel was played by Richard Boone, a descendant of Daniel Boone. Okay, did not know that. Star Trek II might be my favorite film of all time, so I'm not comparing it that way. The way Shatner deflates when he realized what happened to Spock. Well, but you see, yeah, what I'm saying there, it's not about comparing like whether D&D or Star Trek 2 is a better movie. That's an unfair comparison, I will agree, because clearly Star Trek 2 is one of the greatest sci-fi adventure movies of all time. D&D is a silly little comedy set in a fantasy realm. However, I'm talking about if you're going to say if for a movie to be intelligent, I think of movies like Star Trek 2 where the entire movie is theme layered on theme layered on theme. And so on the surface it's a simple revenge story. But the more you dig into it, the more layers to that onion you find, and that's what's beautiful about it. You could probably get a PhD in philosophy or in writing just using Star Trek Two for your thesis, and so it's that deep. So and yes, Shatner, people like to make fun of Shatner's acting. Shatner is the guy that ham fists it up, but he's also the guy that can make you cry with a subtle tone. And that's something people miss. Like in Star Trek 2, you get it all, right? You get him going, God, and then 5 minutes later, he's sitting there completely broken before his ex-girlfriend, talking about how, there's a man out there he hasn't seen in 14 years that wants to kill him, and his son would be happy to help. And you can just see what a broken man he is in that scene. So Shatner delivers it all. It's just that we remember the over the top ham moments. And the funny thing is, nobody thinks about the fact that when he yelled Khan, he was faking it because he knew, he and Spock had the whole plan going at that time. So he knew he wasn't trapped there. I agree. It should be serious. Good call. Yeah, and that's why I'd be nervous about the D&D writers. Not that they're bad writers, but that's a genre mismatch. I think it's the same problem that you had with Taika Waititi when they gave him free reign with Thor. It was fun with Ragnarok, but then with Love and Thunder, they just said, "Okay, Taika, do what you want to do," and he did, and we got Thor: Love and Thunder. Too much comedy. I think that the writers for any project need to be subject matter experts on that project. Not that they have to be Star Trek fanboys. I don't necessarily think that a requirement to be, because like you look at Star Trek 2, obviously Harv Bennett and Nicholas Meyer were not Star Trek fans before making Star Trek 2. But they studied Star Trek and they understood Star Trek when they started writing and producing Star Trek. And so I think that if you're going to do science fiction, you need to be a science fiction writer, not a Gilmore Girls writer that's going to write a science fiction show, which is unfortunately what we got with Discovery and sadly, Strange New Worlds, which even though I like Strange New Worlds, it would be a lot better if they had some sci-fi writers. What I meant was they knew the Forgotten Realms lore and took the lore seriously. I don't think they took the lore seriously. They may have known the lore, but I don't think they took it seriously. At least now, granted, I haven't played D&D in a long time, so maybe the lore has changed since I was a kid. But I don't remember silly fat dragons and everything being played for laughs. So I get it that that's how the movie was made. But and by the way, you could say the same thing. It's a fair criticism. You could make a Lower Decks, right? Because Lower Decks clearly knows Trek lore, but doesn't take it seriously. But that's intentional, and that's okay in the right context. And I'm not saying that I enjoyed Lower Decks. I mean, I did enjoy Lower Decks. I'm not saying it's a brilliant tour de force because they knew the lore, but I do think it enhances it. So I'll agree with you that they may know the lore, but I don't. But I would disagree with you about them taking it seriously. Right, I forgot Tony was still alive after he snapped, so we assumed they actually buried a body, but maybe Shield Hydra kept the body. Yeah, we have no idea what happened to his body. There's no mention of it in Endgame or in any movie after that. Gorilla in all caps. The caps are really unnecessary, Gorilla. I read all the comments. I call BS. Star Trek, Discovery, and Picard were serious, and they both sucked. I didn't say that making it serious automatically makes it good. I'm saying that for it to be great, it needs to be serious. However, anybody can write a bad Star Trek script, whether it's serious or silly, you know. So you may have misunderstood me. I'm not suggesting that simply saying it's Star Trek and it's serious equals good, because you're right. Star Trek Discovery and Picard were both serious and they were both lame. I will agree with you 100%. And Mercer asking, or Stan asking Mercer if it makes you cry. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Let's see. Robert says another thing that didn't make sense. Steve Rogers decided to go back to the past and live. Wouldn't that have changed many of the events that took place in the Avengers movies and Captain America? Yeah, see, that needs some explaining too. And I would love to see that in in the next film, because Cap, based on the rules of time travel that they established in Endgame, Cap going back and staying back would not have then translated to old man Cap sitting on the lake. Because it would have created a branch reality because that's the type of time travel MacGuffin that they're using in this. Keep in mind, I think that in reality, time travel is impossible, but for the sake of the movies, they're using basically the branching quantum type of time travel to where if you go back and you change something, you'd simply create a new reality. You didn't change your existing reality. So that means that if he goes back and lives with Peggy Carter, then that means he's living with Peggy Carter in an alternate timeline. He's not living with Carter in the 616. But then we see him in the 616 as an old man. So how did he get there? Now, there's a couple of prevailing theories on that. One is that the 616 isn't the prime timeline. Instead, what we're seeing is that's the cap from another timeline that had to return the stone that branched off and created the 616 timeline. That's one theory. And as supporting evidence, you can say that we know that Peggy Carter was married, but we never see her husband. And so there basically the idea is that it was Steve all along. However, it also doesn't really explain why is it that Peggy and Steve had those heart-to-heart talks in the early films. So that's one theory. Another theory is that Steve, he had the time travel bracelet made by Tony Stark, so he could have lived his entire life with Peggy, and then when Peggy died, which we know she dies, at the time of Civil War. So when Peggy dies, then he uses the thing to go back to his timeline, and he materializes at the lake and sits there and waits for them to finish the whole thing. Another idea is that Steve had made these arrangements with Hulk and even with Winter Soldier prior to him going back in time. Hulk and Winter Soldier knew he was going to do this, which is why Bucky was not surprised when he appeared at the side of the lake, and Hulk would have had to be a willing accomplice to help him use the time travel device. So that's a possibility as well. But I do think it needs some splaining. Because yes, him staying back there would have changed history, which also, by the way, could lead to a corrupted Tony Stark. What if it's all Steve Rogers' fault that Stark becomes Doom? What if, like Steve goes back in time, creates an alternate history in which Tony Stark becomes Doctor Doom instead of Victor Von Doom, and then when he comes back to our timeline, Doom figures out that he did that and Doom follows him. That could be interesting. Movies. Who would have been there to bring back? Let's see. Movies. Who would have been there to bring back the Winter Soldier back to the good side? Yeah. Oh, yeah. If he had lived his life there, you're right. And there are themes in the D&D movie, at least as much as the average film. It's an easy miss, but when they use the tablet to resurrect Helga instead of the girl's real mother, it says a lot. I don't remember the sequence you're talking about, but I'm not saying there aren't themes. Again, listen to carefully to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there are no themes. I'm saying there aren't deep themes. I'm not saying there's no intelligence. I'm just saying it's not a very intelligent film. And so you're right. You just said, well, it's got as much as the average film. Great, but I'm not looking for a film to be average. I'm not going to say a movie is great unless I think it is significantly above average. Since this is church life, we are having a discussion during the Twilight Zone, which watch party, on whether or not it is considered blasphemy to say there is no God if you're acting in a movie or TV show. I would dare say no, unless you are knowingly participating in a project attempting to convince people that that is in fact the truth. So, for example, if you are in a movie And in that movie, you are playing an atheistic character. And so your atheistic character spouts out atheistic propaganda. However, the theme of the movie is that the atheist character is clearly wrong. I would say there's no sin there because Jesus used parables in his instructions. And parables are simply fictitious stories with a spiritual or moral center. And in some of these parables, there were bad people. The Bible mentions pagans, the Bible mentions false gods. Does that mean that it's blasphemy for the Bible to mention these things? Of course not. The Bible says only the fool says in his heart that there is no God. Well, it can't articulate that unless it just articulated that. And you can't say that without saying it. So, no, I don't think that it is blasphemy to be an atheistic character in a movie or TV show unless you are knowingly trying to use that medium to convince people of said blasphemy. It's hard to articulate here, but they're making a comedy, but every aspect of the lore was accurate from Fat Dragon to all the spells used, and but that was clever was the way they also had the comic tone in actual D&D game, of an actual D&D game. Well, that's where I disagree with you, and maybe it just has to, it's a generational thing, because to me, D&D was not comedic. It never was. And so I don't understand where, yes, sometimes when you're hanging out with your friends, you might make a joke, but the adventure was always taken very seriously, at least when I was young. And so you treated your paladin like he was a paladin, not like he was Chris Hemsworth in Thor Love and Thunder. So I don't know, maybe I'm just old and all that, but that's how I see it. Captain America was also one of the main ones to uncover the secret Hydra plot to take over. That's true. So Hydra in that alternate world would probably be in power. Cinnabon! Have not, it's funny. I mentioned you, I think to Trustin the other day. We were talking, and he said, Cinnabon, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. I said, yeah, I miss that guy. So good to see you. Rumor has it that Asian Kyle might return in season 4 of Strange New Worlds. So, hope you're doing well. And says, hey, good to see you're not dead. Definitely, yeah, glad I'm not dead yet. Although Darren was trying his best earlier, you missed it. Stan says, "Oh, just wondering if watching the end of Wrath of Khan made Mercer cry." Gotcha. Well, I would say this: anybody who watches Wrath of Khan and doesn't cry at the ending, at least the first time they see it, they have no soul. Yeah, Mercer says still cry at the end of the film. I don't cry, but I usually get my eyes water a bit when I watch that movie. Let's see. I think it's okay if I think it's okay if it's a script. It depends on where your heart. Yeah, but it also, again, I think that it depends on if you know if the filmmaker, for example, if let's say that I say, hey, you know what, I'm making a movie and I need someone to play the villain of this movie, and the villain is, because let's face it, if you couldn't do things that are bad as an actor, then no villain could ever exist in any movie, right? Because villains inherently do bad things. Do I think that when, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting his name. Man, he's all over the place. Josh Brolin. When Josh Brolin played Thanos, do I think that Josh Brolin, is endorsing wiping out half of all life in the universe? Of course not. He's playing Thanos. But Thanos is also the villain of the film. If you're playing the hero of a film and that hero is doing horrible things, and in the name of being a hero, I think that might cross a line. It's a fine line to be sure, but and it's also going to depend on the individual's heart and where their heart is. I think that's a fair statement, Stan. But I don't necessarily think that I couldn't, at least with a clean conscience, as an actor, play a part that glorifies, as a not necessarily as the character, but as the film, if it glorifies evil. And that's you know that's up to the individual. But there's also a hierarchy of responsibility. The writer, the director, the producers of this film have a higher moral responsibility for the content of the film than the actors do. And Stan goes on to say, but that reminds me of an actor who refuses to accept any acting role where he'd have to kiss a woman because he will only ever kiss his wife. Well, see, that's funny thing too, is it adultery if an actor is playing a married person, but he's actually married in real life to another person? And I would say it can be if the film takes it too far, right? I do think that, there are documented cases of, we'll just say, intimate moments in film that were not being faked, right? And when that happens, that is adultery, right? And at the same time, I think that graphic sexuality in film is usually unnecessary, and at least I would say this: unless the graphic sexuality is 100% necessary to tell the story, it shouldn't be in the film. And there are plenty of movies where I think that, man, why is this even here? And other movies where it's like, wow, that was surprisingly tasteful, right? So like the recently, my wife and I we're not expecting to see it. The local theater has something called Screen Unseen. So you go to a movie and you don't know what it is until the movie actually starts. And sometimes it's great. You see something you wouldn't have seen that was awesome. In fact, that's how we saw Sisu Road to Revenge. Sometimes it's not so great, and you get a crappy movie, right? And a few weeks ago, I think I talked about this. We saw the movie Christie, which is the true story of the most successful female boxer in American history. And she's still alive. She's my age. And we actually watched a Netflix documentary about her and showing how surprisingly accurate the movie was by watching the documentary. But one of the core aspects of the story is that Christy faced a lot of discrimination from her family and from her hometown because of the fact that she was a lesbian. And so that was a part of the story. And she had no less than 2 or 3 different lovers in the course of the story that were women, plus her husband. And this movie was R rated, so they could have gotten away with a lot of stuff. And I was surprised, pleasantly so, to find that there was absolutely no graphic sexuality in the entire film. It wasn't necessary because it was enough to know where her feelings were and what other people's feelings about that was. That was what was core to the story, not having graphic shots of her making out with other women. And so and so I was able to really enjoy the film without having to cringe at the content like that. And so, on the other hand, there are movies like The Terminator. I love The Terminator. It's a great movie. However, I cannot stand the sex scene in the middle of it that completely breaks the. I mean, I'm sorry, James Cameron. Everybody thinks he's like the greatest director ever. This was a dumb move for a movie because this is a sci-fi horror action film, and then in the middle of the movie, you just pause it for a graphic sex scene just because you can, and then get back to the story. And it was completely and utterly unnecessary. You know what? All you needed to do was to have Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese in the hotel room, relaxing, and then maybe they look into each other's eyes and they start to kiss, fade to black. The next day, you're back to them, doing the C4 and stuff, and of course we find out that she's pregnant. And that would have accomplished the same thing without the gratuitous sex scene. And I think that the pacing of the movie would have been better. And I just, I thought that it was an unnecessary, gratuitous scene. But yeah, anyway, that's a long-winded answer. Let's see. Neil McDonough, I think some religious thing about respecting his marriage vows. Oh, that's the actor that wouldn't. Well, you know what? I can totally respect that. Like, I would have a difficult time if I was actually a Hollywood actor, doing any kind of sexual thing with another actor. You know, especially, at least maybe before I was a Christian, I wouldn't have had a problem with it, but now I absolutely would. But I wonder what he'd think about speaking blasphemous dialogue in an acting role. Yeah, but I would put them basically again. I think it depends on the role and the purpose of the film, and that's important. Merch says, I meant an average MCU film. Not sure what you mean. If you're talking about, are you talking about the themes of D&D compared to an MCU film? I can see that, but that's the problem with D&D. I think it's trying to be an MCU film. And I think that the MCU, I applaud the fact that the last couple of MCU films, namely Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, have tried to incorporate deeper themes and a slightly more serious tone. I absolutely applaud that, and I hope that continues as we get into Doomsday and Secret Wars. Yes, the adventure was taken seriously, but looking at it from outside, you'd realize it's kind of silly. I don't think the adventure. I don't understand where you think the adventure in D&D was taken seriously. I didn't. Chris Pine acted like the entire movie seemed like it was just a joke to him. And granted, that's his character, but at the same time, it felt like he was not. Like you said, it felt like it was someone playing his a thief in a round of D&D as opposed to a thief in that time and in that place. And it's not, to me, that just takes away from the film and pulls me out of it because I'm like, okay, so this isn't even real. I learned from a doctor who is messing with a fixed point in time is very bad thing to do. Yes, I learned from Doctor Who messing with a fixed point in time is very bad thing to do. That is true. I thought Agent Kyle turned into Ancient Helmswoman. No, Ancient Helmswoman was there in season one. So they can't be the same person unless Agent Kyle is really good with makeup, then and putting on wigs. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Agent Kyle is just Agent Kyle. We need him back. So not Danny level of waterworks. No, no. But Danny, he cries at a whole different level than most humans. Let's see. Robert says, just like that in one episode where Rose prevented the death of her father, had very bad results about the Time Eaters coming and erasing that period of time completely. Well, and of course in Marvel, there's the TVA for that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I know that there are rumors that Chris Evans is going to come back, only he's going to play like Captain Hydra instead of Captain America, which could actually make sense if they try to, like, for example, if Steve Rod think about this for a second. If Steve Rogers goes back in time to live with Peggy Carter, and because of that, he prevents Hydra from being exposed, and the Steve Rogers from that timeline that goes forward in time might become Captain Hydra. Yes, nobody was very busy today. I'm not sure what you mean. Doctor Doom versus Samurai Jack. Well, as much as I love Samurai Jack is a dude with a sword at the end of the day. Doctor Doom's armor would not be breached by Samurai Jack's runes. Doctor Doom's armor depends on which version you're talking about, but it's usually made of either vibranium or adamantium. I don't think Samurai Jack's sword is going through it. And Doctor Doom is a sorcerer on par with Aku. Not to mention the fact that he has raw brute force on his side as well. So I don't think that Samurai Jack has a prayer against Doctor Doom. I'm at church outside my church, about to church members only thing right now. All right, you have a good one, Josiah. Mercer says, I'm not religious. My character overall will hold up. I try to help others. I will also speak out on what I'm against, but morality cannot be derived from written mandates. Here's the problem with that. So, first of all, I applaud you if you speak up for what you believe and all that. That's great, and I think that can a person who is not religious be a moral person? Absolutely, because I do, and this is the irony of it, is because Christianity at least already has an explanation for this, is that your morality comes from what we lovingly call your heart or your spirit, if you will, because your heart is just a mechanism that pumps blood around your body, but your spiritual self. And why is it that we all tend to agree on some core moral principles like murder is wrong, beating up kids for fun is wrong, stuff like that, right? Why do we all agree on this? And the Bible says it pretty simply, is that the law of God is written on the human heart, right? So that we are all ingrained with this understanding of the moral code already. Now, if you want to say that morality can't be derived from written mandates, well, yes and no. I would say this: written mandates are a reflection of morality. It's not the origin of morality. The written, but then you have a problem where some churches will try to alter said mandates, and that's where I have a big problem. But if you look at the written mandates of the actual Bible, we've been going through Leviticus on the weekday streams, and but even back in Genesis, tell me one from a moral standpoint, other that really is, about the only ones that you can come up with as far as moral standards that you can make a debate about is sexuality stuff. But even that is very well accounted for in the Bible. It's simply a matter of people want to do, they want to pervert what God has given them into something else. And that's, whether you agree with it or not, that is, if God has set a standard for something and we say, yeah, screw you, we're going to do it another way, that's an immoral act. He made him an offer he couldn't refuse. She couldn't refuse. Not sure what you're talking about there. About 12 minutes ago. I don't remember what I said 12 minutes ago. That was during the Eccleston run of playing the Doctor. Yeah, Eccleston, I think, is an underrated Doctor. Granted, David Tennant was way better, but Eccleston was not as bad as people make him out to be. Eccleston was the first Doctor I was introduced to. Oh, wow, you're young. The first Doctor I saw in real time with the show was probably Doctor number 4. Wonder what happened to Deej Odyssey. Does he even do YouTube? I don't know. I haven't looked for him in a while because I have not had time to do much like just YouTubing other than the actual streams. And so let me see. I don't know if he's posted anything recently or not. Let's see. See, man. Yeah, well, let's see. There's this channel. I'm still subscribed. If I go to videos, yeah, he posted a video 2 weeks ago. And he did a live stream a month ago. So he's still around, it looks like. Let's see. The sex scene is how John Connor was conceived, all in caps. Yes, and it's completely unnecessary. You know, everybody was conceived through sex except for this one guy. And, well, two guys technically, because Adam wasn't either. But but that does that mean that every time we have a dramatic revealing that a woman is pregnant that we have to have a graphic sex scene in that movie? Because I don't think that that's a necessity. Grim Reaper from the Frighteners versus the Headless Horseman. I don't know who Grim Reaper from the Frighteners is. They wanted to sell to you in their passion. You can do that without having to see naked body parts flailing around. You don't need naked body parts to show passion. In fact, that's a cheap way to do it. It's basically what the if you can't get it from the acting, then you just get it from the graphic nature of it. I'm sorry, you're not going to sell me that you had to have the sex scene in the Terminator for it to work. Because you know what? You could very easily do it with just a loving glance and a fade to black. And in fact, that's actually more classy and leaves more to the imagination. So you might say when we find out she's pregnant at the end of the movie, you go, oh, and it's more of a reveal. Just like John Wayne never got to got into too intimate with any on-screen female relationships. I didn't know John Wayne never did. I never been into John Wayne, so I couldn't say much about his movies. Would you have a problem with it really if you went down the acting road? Your life would be so different. You probably wouldn't be the you are now. Well, I understand what you're saying, and I did say before I was a Christian, I probably would not object so strongly to it. So if I had become an actor instead of a an engineer, then I probably would have a different view on it. But that's not reality, so I can't say for sure what I would have or would not have done. Fingers crossed, they say my plane is fixed, so I'm going home. Have fun. All right, well, you have a good one, buddy. Hope your plane is fixed. Are you going to watch Starfleet Academy? Yes. Crash Bandicoot versus Mario. Well, Mario's a stubby little Italian guy, and Crash Bandicoot is a wild animal with a gigantic mouth, so I'm going to give it to Crash. They didn't show anything, but the piano music in that scene was awesome, and mostly I agree with you, which is why I hate uh, Game of Thrones. I assume that's what that is. Well, Game of Thrones is just overtly graphic just to be graphic. But actually, you do see some things in that scene that are unnecessary. And again, it's this when I talk. So, what does gratuitous mean? Right? Gratuitous basically is just saying that something is inserted in just for its sake, as opposed to because it's necessary for the plot. Right? And there's lots of gratuitous content in film. And I am a person that opposes gratuitous sex and, for the most part, gratuitous violence. Now, sometimes something might appear to be gratuitously violent, but it's really not if it's the point. Like if you watch Sisu, Sisu is a farce as far as the violence is concerned. And so the violence is ridiculously over the top. People explode, people, just all, so, once in the first movie, Sisu literally died. He's underwater. They're trying to smoke him out because he's hiding in this lake. So that one of the Nazi soldiers dives in after him, and Sisu grabs a knife, cuts his throat open, and then breathes the air out of his open throat. I mean, that's disgusting, but it's done in such a campy and over the top way that that's just like the whole point of this movie is just to demonstrate the concept of Sisu, which that's really the whole point of the movie. Not a deep movie, not a thinking movie at all. Now, as far as if I'm watching a more serious film, and there's an action sequence. And in that action sequence, somebody is shot. Okay, well, actually, here's a great example. It's not the most serious movie, but it is a decent action movie. If you've ever seen Con Air, Con Air, for the most part, good movie. At the end of the movie, the way that Cyrus dies is so ridiculously gratuitous. It's just stupid. And unfortunately, to me, it breaks the whole movie because the rest of the movie was, despite it being a Nicolas Cage movie, is actually a fairly, grounded film. And all of a sudden you have this guy there's a he's thrown, I'm trying to remember exactly, he's like thrown through a bunch of broken glass, lands on a conveyor belt, where his head ends up at the bottom of a rock smasher, and it's just like this really dumb over the top thing. When we go out of our way to make the death of the villain or whatever as up close and graphic as possible, when the rest of the movie wasn't that way, that becomes gratuitous. Terminator is not a romantic movie, right? We don't have, there are movies that are about sex, there are movies that are about romance. But the Terminator is about neither of those things. And so the Terminator is about a robot from the future trying to kill a girl to prevent her from having a baby, right? And yes, the baby is an important part of the plot, but the conception of the baby isn't. Yes, it's because in fact, the fact that Kyle Reese is the father is in no way, shape, or form a major plot point. It's just a little reveal at the end of the movie. And so, if it was a major part of the plot, then they just completely ignored it. Josiah says, "Looks like we're at the end. We're definitely getting close." Yep, and incest bastards in Game of Thrones. Perhaps that's why Joffrey is such an evil person. Look, I watched the first season of Game of Thrones. I found it distasteful, and honestly, the only character I liked, what they killed in the last episode. So I was like, okay, well, I'm out, and that's all I've watched of Game of Thrones. Don't care about the rest, and I don't care how many people say, "Oh, but it got really good." I don't care. The show is just a depraved display of how much raunch can you get away with in a show and try to call it a Lord of the Rings clone. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Do you have any films you watch every year? Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. People think it's a Christmas movie because it came out in, I don't know, December or whatever, and it also happens to take place at a Christmas party. But it's not like Die Hard deals is like a Christmas themed movie. It just happens to have a setting. Die Hard could have just as easily been at a St. Patrick's Day party, and you could have kept everything else pretty much the same. You'd have to change one or two lines. Like instead of ho ho ho, now I have a machine gun. It could be, well, kiss me, Blarney Stone. Now I have a machine gun. It doesn't really matter that it's Christmas. Now, if you compare that to another movie that came out Christmas time that is also extremely violent, and that is Violent Night. I think Violent Night is a Christmas movie. Not just because Santa is the main character, but Christmas themes are throughout the movie. And the whole point of the movie is people basically believing in Christmas again. Another one, the one that we like to watch, we don't necessarily watch it every year, but we talked about we're going to definitely watch it this year, is Krampus. And Krampus is a movie that it's a warning about losing the Christmas spirit, about misplacing what Christmas is all about. And so I think it's a really good movie. And it's obviously a genuine Christmas movie. But then we have the usual stuff that we like to watch. Like we'll usually watch things like The Grinch and stuff like that. Or I should say, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because there's like three different versions of The Grinch now. I'm talking about the originals, the one we almost always watch. I like the other two, but they're not. They're definitely not an every year kind of thing. My dad finished The Choose. I assume you mean Chosen, but okay. Santa versus Krampus. Well, that's a tough one. I would probably have to give it to Krampus in a straight up fight, but Santa has Christmas magic on his side, so it's hard to say. Just like Lethal Weapon 2, I believe it was set during Christmas, doesn't make it a Christmas movie. Yeah, I don't think that just a movie taking place in December does not make it a Christmas movie. A movie being released in December doesn't make it. Like, for example, this coming Christmas, the movie Anaconda is coming out. Anaconda is in no way, shape, or form going to be a Christmas movie. It's going to be a silly farce, right? And I actually think it looks like it might be funny, but we'll see. But the also, we also have like Wicked just came out, and Wicked is considered, it's a holiday season movie, right? And some people are calling it a Christmas movie, and Wicked is definitely not a Christmas movie. It's just a butchering of the Wizard of Oz. Lethal Weapon has a scene in a Christmas tree store. Okay, but that doesn't make it a Christmas movie. You know, at least to me, a Christmas movie, and granted, and the problem is it's all subjective, right? A Christmas movie, to me personally, is a movie that is not just happens to be in December, but is about the concept of at least the holiday of Christmas, if not the actual first Christmas. But Lethal Weapon is about neither. What if someone hit young Michael with a dustpan? Well, I'm sure that has happened at least once. But then I would be slightly more dusty, I guess. That's an interesting thought. So, what did we learn today? I think the main thing that we can take away from today's live stream is that Darren is indeed a coward.